Good evening and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. Am I audible and visible? Good evening, Pari. Am I audible and visible? Good evening, Isha. Thank you. Let some more people join in and then I'll begin. I'm fine. Thank you, Isha. I hope the same of you. Basic strong for history. Read basic books, Isha. Read your NCRT books. That is meant for developing a good foundation, a strong foundation. Greetings, Garima. Right. So let us begin today's session. Yesterday, we discussed French Revolution. I was on the verge of finishing the topic, but then I ran out of time. But then we have discussed all these aspects about the French Revolution. The French Revolution, you know, took place because of the peculiar social structure of France. We have seen the social structure of France. It was a three-tier social structure with the higher clergy at the top, followed by the higher nobility and the commoners. And the higher clergy and the higher nobility enjoyed all the privileges without having to perform any duties towards the church or the government, and all the burden of taxation fell upon the members of the third estate or the commoners. The privileged classes were also exempted from the payment of taxation. The higher clergy and the higher nobility did not pay any taxes. They were not expected to pay any taxes. Then we look at the character and nature of the revolution, the causes for the outbreak of the revolution, social causes, political causes, economic factors, the role of philosophers, etc. We have looked at that. Then the course of the revolution, the National Assembly, how the National Assembly came to power. That is, the Estates General named itself as the National Assembly, and the National Assembly brought out the first constitution for France, the Constitution of 1791. And we have changes in the administration, in the judiciary, in the legislature, executive, etc., and also in the religious field. We have also looked at the merits and demerits of the National Assembly. Then we saw how what are the circumstances which led to the National Convention coming to power. National Convention coming to power. You have Louis trying to escape out of France, and he was caught and brought back. You have Austria and Prussia declaring war against France, and we have the Declaration of Pillnitz issued by the kings of Austria and Prussia, and also the Duke of Brunswick issued his manifesto or declaration, and that resulted in a revolt in Paris. One of the Jacobin leaders, Georges Danton, seized power in his hands. He called for the dissolution of the National Assembly and the election to a national convention. And in the Battle of Valmy, the people of France were able to defeat the Austro-Prussian forces. And these are the circumstances which brought the National Convention to power. And the first task before the National Convention was to decide what they had to do with their king. Of course, the National Convention declared France as a republic. So in the year 1792, France became a republic for the first time. And of course, the king was guillotined, and you have a civil war within France. You have a civil war. At the same time, we have six countries declaring war against France. So that resulted in the National Convention bringing into existence the so-called Reign of Terror. And in the Reign of Terror, France was able to bring internal order and also was able to defeat four out of the six countries. And thus, France enjoyed peace both internally and externally. And to tackle England and Austria, the task was entrusted to a person called Napoleon Bonaparte. So that is part two of the French Revolution. We will discuss in some time. We were discussing the impact of the French Revolution. I have of course discussed why the revolution broke out in France, what are the peculiar conditions which existed in France compared to other countries of Europe, which led to the revolution taking place there. Then we looked at the internal and external achievements of the French Revolution. We will look at that now again. I could not complete the external impact or the external achievements of the French Revolution, but let us quickly recap. Internally, what happened in France, of course, you have monarchy coming to an end, and people became supreme in that country. Feudalism, serfdom were brought an end to. Privileges based on birth or wealth was also brought to an end. In the economic sphere, we have the guild restrictions were smashed to pieces. Free trade was introduced, and the right to property, private property, was upheld. Then, regarding administration, we have election, which replaced selection and nomination. A uniform system of administration was introduced throughout the country. Sale of offices, like the nobility of the robe, was abolished. The sentiment of nationalism, spread because of the French Revolution. That is the love towards one's country. They made France French the national language. France came to have her own calendar, and of course, the idea of nation in arms was born. The idea of nation in arms was born, and people realized that nation is no more superior to its king. So loyalty to the king was replaced by loyalty to the nation. I stopped here yesterday. Let me move on. Let us discuss the external causes or the external achievements of the French Revolution. Saurav, I have already explained what is serfdom. Serfdom is the lowest category of farmer, right, Saurav? Maybe you have missed the class. That's why you're asking me such basic questions. We have clarified it yesterday also, because I have discussed this day before yesterday about serfdom, etc. Okay, we'll come back here. Doesn't matter. The lowest category of farmer was called a serfdom. There were three types of farmers in France: the freeholders, the villeins, and the serfs. Generally, that was the case in other feudal societies also in Europe. Now, let us come to the external impact of the French Revolution. Now, how did the French Revolution impact Europe and the rest of the world? Basically, we're talking about impact on Europe and the rest of the world. You see, initially, feudalism was abolished in France. Feudalism as an institution was abolished in France by the people of France, and this had a repercussion throughout Europe. And gradually, feudal institutions became weak and finally disappeared from all over Europe. This is number one. So, feudalism as an institution disappeared in France and then disappeared in the rest of Europe. Number two, establishment of liberty and equality first in France and then in the rest of Europe. We're talking about Europe here. You see, Americans already were enjoying the freedom, liberty, equality, fraternity, rule of law. They give themselves a constitution, etc. But that was a separate continent. We are talking about Europe per se, where France enjoyed equality and liberty, and then these sentiments spread to other parts of Europe. So, okay, this is number two. Then social equality, individual freedom were held precious. Social equality and individual freedom. That individual freedom is the basic rights of a human being that was valued because it first happened in France and then the same sentiment spread throughout Europe. Then political power shifted from the nobility to the middle classes. Political power shifted from the nobility to the middle classes because feudal institutions all over France and later Europe became weak. So the nobility lost their hold over the people, and you have the rise of the middle classes. It happened in France first, where the middle class came into prominence, and then the example of the middle classes was borrowed by the farmers and the artisans, who began to clamor for better rights. For example, franchise rights, voting rights, and better privileges, better rights, etc. So this is another external impact of the French Revolution. Further, it shook the control of the church over the people. Earlier, the church was having a iron-like grip over the people, but then because of the French Revolution, church lost its hold within France, and it had its impact in other parts of Europe also. So faith became more important than theology. Reason became more important than faith, and theology became philosophy became more important than theology as such. So these ideas became more important, right? Reason became more important than faith, and philosophy becomes more important than theology. So church lost its hold over the people. Then we have the growth of humanitarianism. What is humanitarianism? That is, you see, a individual human being is good by nature. Everybody is good by nature, but the circumstances make a person bad. right? Circumstances. That is one of the sentiments of humanitarianism. So, and in the value of a life, the value of an individual human being's life came to be valued. And as a result of humanitarianism, you have a number of movements which took place throughout the world, throughout Europe and rest of the world. For example, movements to abolish slavery, movements for reform of prisoners, then movement to abolish child labor. Then, of course, the Methodist movement in England. Basically, the Methodist Church, you have a reform movement because of the French Revolution, where the Methodist Church tried to reform itself. These are all humanitarian movements which took place in various parts of the Europe as well as other parts of the world because of the French Revolution. Then we have the rise and growth of the sentiment of nationalism, that is the love towards one's country. In France, when external enemies, when Prussia and Austria declared war against France, Austria and Prussia, you have the people of France, becoming very angry with those external powers. And when they set their foot on the soil of France, you have nationalistic and patriotic feelings oozing amongst the French people, and they were the ones later who fought against all these six countries, you know, and they were able to defeat four out of the six countries. So it spread the sentiment of nationalism or love towards one's country. And as a result of the French Revolution, we have nationalist movements beginning in various parts of the world. For example, you see, we have the Germans and the Italians who desired to unify themselves into a nation. The sentiments of the French Revolution spread rapidly throughout Europe. And in Germany as well as in Italy, you have political fragmentation. They were ruled by kings. I will come to unification of Germany today after the Napoleonic era. So you have Germans and Italians wanting to unify themselves into a nation. Then we have the Balkans. Balkans means southeast portion of Europe. I'll come to that when I do Eastern question, a topic called Eastern question. Balkans means southeast portion of Europe. Okay, so there in the southeast portion of Europe, you had a huge, powerful empire called the Ottoman Turkish Empire. Right? It was born in the 13th century. Osman or Othman was the founder. I have told you briefly about this Ottoman Empire when we discussed about geographical discoveries and also Renaissance. So you have the Ottoman Empire, which was very huge. The peak of the Ottoman, it was established in 13th century, and the peak of the Ottoman Empire was in the 16th and 17th century. In its largest territorial extent, it included even Vienna in Austria. But then the ruler was a Muslim, that is, the Ottoman Turkish Sultan was a Muslim, and his governors were also Muslims. And within the Ottoman Turkish Empire, there were some Christian minorities like the Bulgarians, the Serbians, the Croatians, the Greeks, the Albanians, etc. So all sorts of atrocities were committed by the Ottoman Turkish government on these Christian minorities. Now, in the 18th century, the beginning of the 18th century, Turkey became weak. Towards the end of the 18th century, Turkey became weak. That is, Ottoman Turkish Empire became weak. And there was a desire amongst these Christian minorities to break free from the control of the Ottoman Turkish Sultan. And this was courtesy because of the French Revolution. The sentiment of liberty, equality, democracy, republicanism had also spread into the Balkans. And these Christian minorities who were under the control of the Ottoman Turkish Sultan wanted to achieve their emancipation. They wanted to achieve their freedom from the Ottoman Turkish Sultan. This is another impact of the French Revolution. Further, we have in Spain and Portugal revolutions breaking out in 1820. In Spain and Portugal, revolutions broke out in 1820, and people of these two countries desired to get rid of monarchy. They wanted to get rid of monarchy as a form of government. Further, you have the Home Rule movement, which got sympathy in Ireland. Home Rule movement going on in Ireland, where the Irish people were fighting for legislative independence from England. So that got sympathy. And further, we have the national movements in all these countries: Egypt, Indonesia, Indochina. That is, Indochina is Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. That's called Indochina, which was under the control of France. So Egypt, Indonesia, Indochina. You have the Boer Wars in South Africa, even in Latin America, where you have Spain ruling over Latin America, India, and of course, Boer Wars in South Africa. In all these countries, you have people wanting to break free from the control of their colonial powers and achieve their emancipation or freedom. So all these were manifestations of the French Revolution. The desire on the part of the Germans and Italians to unify themselves into a nation, The Balkans became a scene of nationalist revolutions. You have Spanish and Portuguese revolutions, which desired to overthrow monarchy. And of course, you have the Home Rule movement in Ireland, which got sympathy, and national movements in various countries like Egypt, India, Boer Wars in South Africa, etc. They're all manifestations of the French Revolution. Further, the French Revolution gave a boost to constitutionalism. What is constitutionalism? You see, in France, people of France give themselves a document, a constitutional document. And through the document, they secured their rights and interests, the rights and freedoms and interests. So, as a result of the French Revolution, people in other parts of Europe and the world decide to secure their interests and freedoms through a constitutional document, so that nobody violates their rights and basic freedoms. And so that is called constitutionalism. And the ideas of divine right theory of monarchy, benevolent despotism received a setback, right? Then of course we have nation becoming more important than the king. As we have seen in the French Revolution, nation was considered to be more important than the king. So people overthrew autocracies and demanded constitutional documents everywhere, wherever, so that their rights and freedoms are safeguarded. Further, the confiscation of church property by the government reduced the sanctity of private property. So you see, the government had taken away the church property, and that weakened the idea of property, sanctity of property. As a result, socialism became a political program than a speculative doctrine. You have a number of socialist ideas which are part of the French Revolution. You see, what are the socialist ideas we can think about as part of the French Revolution? You see, you have laws of the maximum. Yesterday we have discussed this, laws of the maximum, where the wages of workers was fixed, the prices of essential commodities were fixed. Then you have rationing of scarce commodities. Then we have peasant proprietors being created. So lands from the nobles were taken away. Lands from the nobles were taken away. No compensation was given to the nobles, and those lands were given and divided into small plots and sold away to farmers at a very cheap rate of interest. So these are all socialist ideas. So that received a boost because of the French Revolution, laws of the maximum, rationing, peasant proprietorships, okay, etc. So this is about the external impact of the French Revolution. Are they with me, all of you? All of you, did you get me that? Yes, doctrine. I didn't get you, Rajneet. All of you clear? Okay. Right. Now, let us, yes. So it was no more a speculation. It was a reality. In other words, socialism it became a political program. It was no more a speculative doctrine where you speculate whether to have it or not. There was no speculation. It was very clear that maximum number of people should be benefited. You see, did you understand? Maximum number of people should be benefited by the government. So that's why that is socialism, right? Did you understand, Brajneet? Am I clear? Am I able to get across here? Okay. Now take down some points, please. Take down some points quickly, so that we can go to the next topic, that is Napoleon Bonaparte. Ideas thrown up by the French Revolution. What are the ideas thrown up by the French Revolution? Please take down that quickly. Are you there with me, all of you? Number one, liberty, equality, fraternity. So these are all ideas thrown up by the French Revolution. Number one, liberty, equality, fraternity. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Number two, quickly, constitutionalism, and that is another one, constitutionalism. Socialism also there, Parveen, constitutionalism, a constitutional document. Then democracy, rule of law, democracy, then rule of law, then popular popular sovereignty. Number 6 is laissez-faire, that is free trade, laissez-faire. Number 7 is natural rights of man, natural rights of man. Right? Then we have separation of powers. Separation of powers. Then filling state offices on the basis of merit. Filling state offices on the basis of merit. So these are the various ideas thrown up by the French Revolution. Natural fight. What do you mean by natural fight? Natural rights. Yeah, that is also there here. Natural rights of man. Yeah. Um, uh, of course, this is also there as part of the French Revolution. Natural rights of man. The Americans gave themselves a Bill of Rights, and then the French gave themselves a document. Okay, the natural rights of man. Yes, Pari, that is true. It led to humanitarian movements also, right? So here it led to humanitarian movements. Satya, I have discussed suspensive veto yesterday. Suspensive veto, I've already discussed yesterday. 7th point is natural rights of man. Yeah, man means both the sex. That is true. Human being. But it is called natural rights of man. Okay, rule of law. Right. Laissez-faire, free trade. Laissez-faire, free trade. These are all the ideas thrown up by the French Revolution. Now, Rajib, maybe you can listen to the records of the class. Floods in Assam, so I'm not able to attend my class regularly. I can understand, but then take care of yourself. No, that was suspensive veto was not devised by the French, Satya. It was I would not say it was a part of the French Revolution. Suspensive veto. Okay, are you there with me? Now take down some more. Take some. No, let me explain to you what is the difference between the National Assembly and the National Convention. All of you, I seek your attention, please. Let us understand the difference between National Assembly and the National Convention. National Assembly and you have the National Convention, which replaced the National Assembly. National Convention. Now, as you all know, the National Assembly, what was the National Assembly? The Estates General, all of you, you know this, the Estates General renamed itself as the National Assembly. Isn't it? The Estates General had renamed itself as the National Assembly, and Louis had no choice once the Bastille fell. He had no choice but to recognize the demands of the members of the Third Estate. So he recognized their demand, and then this National Assembly was in power for 2 years. It was in power for 2 years, isn't it? So 1789 to 91. Then we had the National Convention which came to power. Now let us understand this part. Let's understand this part. What are the circumstances which led to the National Convention coming to power? National Assembly was replaced by National Convention. What are the circumstances that led to the replacement of the National Assembly by the National Convention? Now you see, people of France, under the National Assembly, the plight of the people of France remained the same. It had been 3 years since the revolution had begun. You see, it was about almost 3 years since the revolution had begun. But then, even after 3 years, the common people of France still was suffering. The common man of France was still suffering. He had no liberty. He had no liberty, neither he had equality. Now, how do we say this? He had neither liberty or equality. If you look at the Constitution of 1791, the Constitution of 1791, property rights were given only to, the voting rights were only given to the propertied classes. So the major section of French society were denied voting rights just because they did not have property with them. They were denied voting rights. So there was no liberty and equality in France. Further, you have the food problem continuing. Food, there was food scarcity even now, even after 3 years after the beginning of the revolution. National Assembly had come into existence, and still the situation in France had not improved for the common person, for the common man, right? And they became very, very angry, the people of France. They realized that they had only replaced one set of masters by another. King had been replaced by a National Assembly, and the National Assembly was not doing anything great when compared to the king. And that's the time when revolutionaries came into the forefront. They were all professional revolutionaries who came to the forefront, and they were goading the masses, trying to influence the masses to overthrow the existing order. That is, overthrow the National Assembly itself, because things were not improving for the common man. But then that's a time when you have Louis trying to escape, right? Louis tried to escape into Austria, and he was caught and brought back. And then you have foreign armies encircling France, and the Declaration of Pillnitz was issued. Declaration of Pillnitz. What was this Declaration of Pillnitz? That it was issued by the kings of Austria and Prussia, that it is in the interest of Europe. Europe is interested in bringing Louis back on the throne of France with full authority. And they wanted the restoration of monarchy in France. That was the gist of the Declaration of Pillnitz. And then you have foreign armies encircling France, that is Austria and Prussia. Austria and Prussia declared war against France. And what happened? France was defeated on the battlefront. On the battlefield, France was defeated. Now, what happened is the revolutionaries became scared. That is, the Jacobins became scared of the turn of events. They were actually hoping, many of the revolutionaries, the Jacobins were hoping and praying that France should lose in the battle. If France is defeated by Austria and Prussia, then what will happen? The monarchy will be discredited. That is, the monarchy cannot show its face, and that way they will have a reason to overthrow monarchy. So they wanted, many of the revolutionaries, the Jacobins wanted the monarchy to be defeated, France to be defeated in the war. And that's what happened. France was defeated by Austria and Prussia. And then you have Austro-Prussian forces entering the soil of France and speedily moving towards Paris. That's a time when the revolutionaries got down to action. What did they do? They overthrew the monarchy. They overthrew the monarchy, and they dissolved the National Assembly and called for a national convention and declared France a republic. Did you understand? They were waiting to introduce republican form of government immediately, and these are the circumstances which allowed them to do that. France was defeated. Foreign armies entered the soil of France to fulfill their ambition of putting Louis back on the throne and restoring monarchy in that country. And the revolutionaries got down to business, wherein they uh, ended monarchy, declared France a republic, and and they called for the dissolution of a national assembly and the election to a national convention. Are you there with me, all of you? Are you able to get the connection here, all of you? Did you get me that? Right, now look here. What was the agenda of the National Convention? What was the purpose of the National Convention? The purpose, what is Declaration of Pillnitz? Ankita, I have told you what is Declaration of Pillnitz yesterday, right? You have Austria and Prussia joining together and issuing the Declaration of Pillnitz, stating that the whole of Europe, all the monarchs of Europe are interested in restoring monarchy in France. That is called Declaration of Pillnitz. Now, what was the agenda? So National Convention came to existence, and what was the purpose of the National Convention? The purpose of the National Convention was to frame a constitution for France. Understand this? The agenda was to frame a new constitution for France, and after having framed a constitution for France, hand over power to a duly recognized government or elected government, hand over power to a recognized government. That was the agenda of the National Convention. But then what happened is the National Convention, then what happened? National Convention decided to guillotine Louis. Louis was guillotined. And then what happened? There was a European intervention. There was a civil war within France. Reign of terror was brought into existence. And then you have six countries declaring war against France. So the National Convention prolonged its stay, stating that there is an emergency in the country. There's an emergency in the country. Within France, there's a civil war going on, and six countries have joined together and declared war against France. And therefore, on the ground that there was an emergency, National Convention refused to hand over power to anybody. It prolonged its rule. It continued to rule over France. And the executive authority under the National Convention was the Committee of Public Safety. I told you 4 institutes were established: the Committee of Public Safety, the Law of Suspects, Revolutionary Tribunal, and the Square of the Revolution. The Committee of Public Safety was the executive body, right, of the National Convention. It was led by Robespierre. We have seen that yesterday. Initially, it consisted of 9 members, whose number was increased to 12 later. And this was the Committee of Public Safety, which decided the foreign policy, which also organized the army to defend France, and also instituted a reign of terror, right? And then this National Convention finally was later overthrown by Napoleon. National Convention was overthrown by Napoleon. Napoleon establishes the so-called consular government, right? This is the connection. Are you able to understand? Sir, after defeated by Austria and Prussia, what happened? All of you, are you there with me? Did you understand whatever I just now told you? After defeating Austria and Prussia, Austria and Prussia defeated France, and they entered France to restore monarchy. And that's the time when the National Convention came to power. The National Assembly was dissolved, right? Monarchy was ended. France was declared a republic, and the National Convention came to power. Pari, did you understand? Yeah, the Jacobins, Gaurav, the Jacobins, wanted the immediate establishment of a republican form of government in France. So when you have an emergency in the country, when a civil war broke out, so they were occupying maximum number of seats in the national, assembly, and that's why they were called the Montagnards or the Jacobins, right? They were the extreme Republicans. They wanted France to become a republic immediately. And now, please understand, in the first stages, understand one more part. One more part of this aspect is of this French Revolution is, you see, in the initial stages. Initial stages means when the National Assembly was in power. That is from the time the revolution broke out until the existence of the National Assembly. We have the domination of the sentiments of Voltaire and Montesquieu. Okay, so Voltaire and Montesquieu's ideas were prominent during this period. Voltaire spoke about what? He spoke about supremacy of reason. Supremacy of reason. He spoke about supremacy of reason and enlightened despotism, isn't it? Enlightened despotism. These are the ideas of Voltaire, and Montesquieu spoke about separation of powers. So, in the initial stages of the revolution, the ideas of Voltaire and Montesquieu were prominent: separation of powers. And during this period, we had the domination of the middle classes. The middle classes of France dominated the proceedings. Even the Constitution of 1791 was their creation. They secured their interests. Fundamental right to property, fundamental right to vote. They were all designed to favor the middle classes and the property classes. So the middle classes secured their interests at the cost of the masses. But in the second stage, that is during the time of the National Convention, we have the idea of Rousseau, which became prominent. Jacques Rousseau. What was the idea of Rousseau? Rousseau spoke about popular sovereignty. Rousseau spoke about popular sovereignty. So people should be supreme in the country, and that's what happened. It was the people of France, the common people of France, who seized power in their hands. They were the ones who fought against the trained armies of Europe and defeated them. They were the ones who declared France a republic, right? And they were beautifully led by the Jacobins, right? During the second stage, Rousseau's philosophy became prominent, that is popular sovereignty, and the French Revolution had become a mass movement. It was the desire of the masses to establish a republic in France, and that was fulfilled with the coming of the National Convention. Did you understand, all of you? Clear, all of you here? Did you understand the connection here? National Assembly, National Convention. Clear? Okay, right. So these are the things, the analytical aspect of this topic, which I wanted to explain to you. Circumstances which led to the National Convention. Okay, the ideas of Voltaire and Montesquieu prominent in the first stage. In the second stage, the ideas of Rousseau were more prominent. Then please take down some more points. Take down some more points regarding the French Revolution. Right? Please take down on a fresh page, number 1. The French Revolution of 1789. Please take down quickly so that I can go to the next topic, Napoleonic era. The French Revolution of 1789 was against the evils of monarchy. Number 1, the French Revolution of 1789 was against the evils of monarchy. Was against the evils of monarchy, but at the same time, it was initiated by the monarchy itself. It was against the evils of monarchy. Yeah, you are right, Gaurav. People are supreme. We are a democratic country, and people are supreme in a democracy, Gaurav. Right. So here, the French Revolution of 1789 was against the evils of monarchy, but at the same time, it was initiated by the monarchy itself. It was initiated by the monarchy itself. Full stop. The revolution commenced with the decision of the king. The revolution commenced with the decision of the king to summon the Estates General. The revolution began with the decision of the king to summon the Estates General, in bracket, French Parliament. French Parliament. Right? This decision indicated that the absolute monarchy of France had failed. This decision indicated that the absolute monarchy of France had failed, and it required the support of the representative body to sustain it. This decision had indicated that the absolute monarchy of France had failed, and it required the support of the representative body to sustain it. So I said French Revolution of 1789 was against the evils of monarchy, but it was initiated by the monarchy itself. The revolution commenced with the decision of the king to summon the French Parliament, that is the Estates General. This decision indicated that the absolute monarchy of France had failed, and it required the support of the representative body to sustain it. This is number 1. Number 2, the French Revolution was fueled by the urges and aspirations of the people. Number 2, the French Revolution was fueled by the urges and aspirations, of the people. But in reality, But in reality, it commenced with the revolt of the aristocracy. But in reality, it commenced with the revolt of the aristocracy when it refused to abide by the orders of the king. It was fueled by the urges and aspirations of the people, but in reality, it commenced with the revolt of the aristocracy when it refused to abide by the orders of the king. You see, when Louis wanted to conduct the meeting, it was the aristocracy, the privileged classes, who got the meeting cancelled, right? So they were preventing Louis from bringing about reforms. So it commenced with the revolt of the aristocracy when it refused to abide by the orders of the king. Did you understand that? Number three, the French Revolution was not planned. Number three, it was not planned. It was not planned, full stop. Even after the session of the Estates General began, even after the session of the Estates General began, comma, nobody was talking about a revolution in France. Even after the session of the Estates General began, that is May the 5th, 1789, even after the session of the Estates General began, nobody was talking about a revolution in France. Full stop. It commenced with the revolt of the aristocracy when it refused to abide by the orders of the king. When it refused to abide by the orders of the king. Saurav. Okay. So nobody was talking about a revolution in France. Full stop. It was the fall of the Bastille. It was the fall of the Bastille that brought the revolutionary temper to the forefront. It was the fall of the Bastille that brought the revolutionary temper to the forefront. It was the fall of the Bastille that brought the revolutionary temper to the forefront. Next, the French Revolution was not an isolated event. The French Revolution of 1789 was not an isolated event. It was the fall of the Bastille that brought the revolutionary temper to the forefront. Umi. That brought the revolutionary temper to the forefront. Next, the French Revolution of 1789 was not an isolated event, but a long drawn out process. It continued for more than 2 decades. It continued for more than 2 decades because Napoleon Bonaparte was the son and successor of the revolution. Napoleon Bonaparte was the son and successor of the revolution. It was not an isolated event, but a long drawn-out process. It continued for more than 2 decades because Napoleon Bonaparte was the son and successor of the revolution. Full stop. This revolution continued even after the downfall of Napoleon. We'll come to Napoleon in just a moment's time. This revolution continued even after the downfall of Napoleon. Full stop. The European revolutions of 1830 and 1848, the European revolutions of 1830 and 1848 were the continuation of the same. So we have revolutions breaking out in France in 1830 and 1848. 2 times again it broke out in France and it had repercussions throughout Europe. So 1789, you have a revolution. We have looked at it. 1830, there was another revolution in France. It had repercussions throughout Europe. 1848, again, there was a revolution in France. Again, it had repercussions throughout Europe. So the European revolutions of 1830 and 1848 were the continuation of the same. Next, the French Revolution was part of a long series of transatlantic revolutions. It was a long series of, you can write FR in short. FR, French Revolution of 1789, was a long series of transatlantic revolutions. Was a long series of transatlantic revolutions. It was a long series of transatlantic revolutions. Next, it was a mass revolution. It was a mass revolution because lakhs of people, lakhs of Frenchmen had participated in it. So just write the keywords. It was a long series of transatlantic revolutions. Then it was a mass revolution because lakhs of Frenchmen participated in it. Next, it was a composite movement. It was a composite movement. It was a composite movement because it transformed the political, administrative. It was a composite movement because it transformed the political, administrative, socio-economic, and religious life of France. Because it transformed the political, administrative, social, economic, and religious life. It transformed political, administrative, socio-economic, and religious life. Composite means it was all encompassing. Sardanjali, it was not, its if impact was not confined to one or two areas. It was an impact which was holistic in nature. It was a composite movement. Next, it was violent in character. The French Revolution was violent in character. Lakhs of people lost their lives. It was violent in character. Lakhs of Frenchmen lost their lives during the revolution. Then the revolution underwent a number of ideological transformations during its course. Next point, the French Revolution underwent a number of ideological transformations during its course. Initially, so it underwent a number of ideological transformations during its course. Initially, it was under the influence of constitutional monarchy. It was initially under the influence of constitutional monarchy. Later on, it came under the influence of republicanism. Later on, it came under the influence of republicanism. Later on, it came under the influence of republicanism. And last point, in the initial phase, it was largely a bourgeoisie revolution. In the initial phase, it was largely a bourgeoisie, middle class revolution. Initially, it was largely a bourgeoisie revolution because the middle classes played an important role in the first few years of the revolution. During the initial phase, it was largely a bourgeoisie revolution because the middle classes played a prominent role during the first few years of the revolution. Later, it became a mass movement. Later, it became a mass movement. Later, it became a mass movement. And it was the masses who declared France a republic. It was the masses who declared France a republic. So these are the additional points I wanted to give you. Clear, all of you? Can I move on to the next topic? Napoleonic era. Napoleonic era. The story of Napoleon Bonaparte. So first point is the French Revolution of 1789 was against the evils of monarchy, but it was initiated by the monarchy itself. It was against the evils of monarchy, but it was initiated. The French Revolution was initiated by the monarchy itself. The revolution commenced with the decision of the king to summon the Estates General. And this decision indicated that the absolute monarchy of France had failed and it required the support of the representative body to sustain it. So he was forced to call a meeting of the Estates General, and that showed that the monarchy had failed to solve the problems of the country, and he wanted the support of the Estates General, the feudal parliament of France, to sustain the monarchy itself. It was not an isolated event. Fourth point is it was not an isolated event. It was a long drawn out process and continued for more than 2 decades because Napoleon was the son and successor of the revolution, and it continued even after the fall of Napoleon. The European revolutions of 1838 and 1848 were the continuation of the same. Yamya, we have seen this. Out of 6 countries, 4 had been defeated by France. Only 2 remained to be tackled, and that is the time when the National Convention had come to power. You have the Declaration of Pillnitz and Brunswick's Manifesto. Georges Janssen seized power in his hands, called for the dissolution of the National Assembly and the constitution of a National Convention. Right, and the first thing the National Convention did is it declared France a republic, and then France got ready to fight wars, because once the emperor was killed, then you have a civil disorder and also a European intervention. So even before the 6 countries, France went to war against the 6 countries, France had been declared a republic. Okay. So initially it was a bourgeoisie revolution, and later it came to be dominated by the masses. What is the difference in world and modern history? Modern history starts from approximately 15th century onwards. 5th to 15th century, you see, understand, from bygone times to about 476 is called ancient period of Europe. Then the 5th to 15th century is called medieval times and early modern times. The 15th century is called early modern times, and then onwards it is modern history. Right, Ramandeep. Okay, let us come back here. Let us talk about Napoleonic era. Now on your screen, Napoleonic era. Yamya, I have done it. I have already summarized it whenever possible. I have done it many times. You have, hold on, let me start this topic, Napoleonic era. Right? I have summarized it. National Assembly, National Convention, difference between National Assembly and National Convention. And then I have given you some additional points which will help you in the mains, in the examination. And also to understand the topic, it will help you. So I have done all whatever I could do. Okay, we'll come back here. Napoleonic era. Let us talk about Napoleon Bonaparte. So here, please understand, 6 countries had declared war against France, and France was able to defeat 4 out of them, and 2 remained to be tackled. Who are the 2 countries to be tackled? Remaining to be tackled? 2 countries remain to be tackled. What are those 2 countries, please? Austria and England. Satyapal, very right. England and Austria. And to tackle England and Austria, the National Convention entrusted the responsibility to this remarkable man called Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay, 2 countries had to be tackled. Now, please understand. Let me give you the gist of this topic. Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, please understand. Napoleon was a commoner like you and me. So he was a commoner, Napoleon Bonaparte. And what you need to understand about Napoleon Bonaparte is we have to talk about the life of Napoleon Bonaparte. It's a factual topic. This Napoleon Bonaparte's topic is factual in nature. So don't get carried away in the maze of information. A lot of information is there about Napoleon Bonaparte. I will give you all the information. But I want you to remember only one thing about Napoleon Bonaparte from the exam point of view. Rest all his wars are not necessary at all. But then I cannot teach Napoleon Bonaparte in a vacuum. I cannot tell you only this part because you will not understand the connection. Because you see, you have Napoleon was a great genius on the battlefield. He was a great general on the battlefield, and he defeated many countries of Europe, including Russia, right? Spain, Holland. He defeated many countries. But whenever he tried to fight against England and defeat England, he repeatedly failed. So that is one part. Then, so his wars from the exam point of view are definitely not important. What are important again are his reforms. Now, as first consul, we'll come to that in some time. He brought about a number of reforms within France, and later he became the Emperor of France. And initially, when he came to power, when he came to limelight, rather, Napoleon Bonaparte was a person who believed in the sentiments of the French Revolution, whatever the revolution had stood for: liberty, equality, fraternity, democracy, republicanism, rule of law, separation of powers. He believed in all these things like a common man of France. But then once he became powerful, he became the first consul of France, and then he became emperor. He forgot about the principles of the French Revolution and he began to reverse all those principles. In other words, he became almost like a dictator of France. All the powers were concentrated in his hands. And what Napoleon began to do is, instead of defeating, he was supposed to defeat England and Austria. That was the job entrusted to him. Napoleon overthrew the National Convention and he seized power in his hands, right? And he began to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries, and he made enemies unnecessarily, right? And ultimately, what happened is all the countries joined together, all the major powers of Europe joined together and defeated Napoleon Bonaparte in the Battle of Leipzig in 1813. We have the Battle of Nations or Leipzig. He was defeated in that battle, and finally he was defeated in the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, and he died as a prisoner in 1821. Right. So this is about the story of Napoleon Bonaparte in brief. But what you need to understand is Napoleon Bonaparte is considered to be the father of Italian and German unification movements, and this is what I want you to remember. He is considered to be the father of Italian and German unification movements for the people of Germany and Italy to feel that they want to unify themselves into a nation because they were a dispersed lot. They were politically fragmented, the Germans as well as the Italians. It was Napoleon who sowed that seed of nationalism and liberalism amongst the Germans and the Italians. And that's why Napoleon Bonaparte is called the father of Italian and German unification movements. That's why that this is what is important from the exam point of view. His reforms, you need to. I will discuss Napoleon in detail. His reforms are important. We will discuss about it. Factual information, basically. We have something called the Concordat, which he enters into with the an agreement which he enters with the Pope. That you should understand, and something called the Continental System of Napoleon Bonaparte. And again, Napoleon is again mentioned when you do modern Indian history. You see, when you do modern Indian history, we have the Anglo-Mysore Wars. We have the Anglo-Mysore Wars, and Tipu Sultan, the king of Mysore, sends an ambassador to Napoleon Bonaparte asking for help. And Napoleon Bonaparte responds positively, and a small French force lands at Mangalore. So you have a port in Karnataka called Mangaluru or Mangalore. So you have a French fleet which lands at Mangalore, and this development is taken very, very seriously by the British. And Napoleon had his own idea, right? He wanted to come to India and, with the help of Tipu Sultan and the Marathas, drive away the British from India. So, what is the thought behind Napoleon? No, what was the idea behind Napoleon wanting to come to India? Right. So again, this is a connection with modern Indian history, world history connected with modern Indian history. Similarly, the person to defeat Napoleon was Arthur Wellesley. Arthur Wellesley was the person who defeated Napoleon Bonaparte in the Battle of Waterloo. But the same Arthur Wellesley had fought the Battle of Turkanahalli in 1799 in the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War. Arthur Wellesley, along with the Nizam and the Marathas, defeated Tipu Sultan. The same Arthur Wellesley went on to fight the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. You see here the connection. We have discussed about American Revolution. Lord Cornwallis fought the battle with the George Washington, isn't it? The Battle of Yorktown, and in the Battle of Yorktown, George Washington defeated Cornwallis. Then Cornwallis was promoted; he was shifted to India, and Cornwallis fought against Tipu in the Third Anglo-Mysore War. And Cornwallis wanted to redeem himself. His prestige had taken a severe beating because everybody blamed Cornwallis for having lost America for the British, right? So he had lost America for the British, so therefore he was being blamed by the Britishers. So his prestige had taken a beating, and he wanted to redeem his prestige, lost prestige. So that's why he joined hands with the Nizam and the Marathas and defeated Tipu. And Tipu had to sign the Treaty of Srirangapatna, where he lost half his kingdom. All those things you study as part of modern India. Similarly, Arthur Wellesley fought against Tipu in the Fourth War, the brother of Richard Wellesley. The Governor General was the Earl of Mornington, Richard Wellesley, but his brother was Arthur Wellesley, who fought against Tipu. And the same Arthur Wellesley went on to fight against Napoleon Bonaparte in the Battle of Waterloo and defeated Napoleon Bonaparte. So there's a link here. So therefore, these things you should understand. Did you understand, all of you? So one aspect you need to remember about Napoleon, how he is considered to be the father of Italian and German unification movements. Some things like continental system, concordat, reforms of Napoleon would be interesting to know. Okay, it will not be important from the exam point of view, but it will be interesting to understand this character called Napoleon Bonaparte, right? Uh, unless you've done modern India, Nikhil, you'll not understand. If you've done modern India, the Anglo-Mysore Wars and all that, then you'll be able to understand the connection. So don't worry about it. The last point. What is the last point? I'll come to that, Akita. Just hold on. Now you give me a hint as regards what is the last point, because I'm speaking in a flow and my brain is also running fast. So I'm trying to keep up with the pace of my brain. So you give me a key word I have used, then I'll get it. Okay, we'll come back here. Don't worry. We'll discuss about Napoleon Bonaparte, and I'll again repeat the main aspects you need to remember about Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay. Now we'll come back here. You see here, this is Napoleon Bonaparte, Napoleonic era, 1789 to 1815. He never came to India, Gaurav. He was thinking of coming to India. That's what I said. I said no, he never came to India. He was thinking of coming. What was the idea behind Napoleon wanting to come to India? I'll tell you later. Okay, I'll tell you later. You just hold on. Okay. Now let us talk about Napoleon Bonaparte. This is the map of Europe in 1789 on the eve of the French Revolution. And as you can see here, this is France. This is France here. Now I have made a synopsis. We will discuss about Napoleon, but please don't get lost in the maze of information. I'm again repeating this. Everything is not important. Definitely his wars are not important, but we will discuss entirely about Napoleon, right? And then I'll tell you at the end what to remember from the exam point of view. Everything is not important. Okay, we'll come back here. So early life and rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. Then during the course of the revolution, what all Napoleon did when the revolution took place in France, his first Italian campaigns and its significance, the Egyptian campaign of Napoleon, the so-called consular government, and the reforms of Napoleon, the foreign policy of Napoleon as first consul. Then Napoleon became the Emperor of France, what all he did as an Emperor of France, and ultimately he was defeated in the Battle of Waterloo, and an estimate of Napoleon. We'll talk about it. So you see here on your screen, Napoleon Bonaparte. He was born in the island of Corsica. On your screen, you can see this is France here. This is France, and this is Italy, and you have an island here called Corsica. And in the island of Corsica, there was a small town called Ajaccio. So he was born there. So he was born in August 1769 at Ajaccio in the island of Corsica. And please understand, just 2 months before he was born, France conquered Corsica from Italy. Earlier, Corsica Island was a part of Italy. Just 2 months before he was born, France conquered Corsica from Italy. So, because of this accident of history, he became a Frenchman by birth. Otherwise, he would have been an Italian by birth. Okay, so his father was Charles Bonaparte, and mother was Letizia Ramolino. Italian names, Charles Bonaparte and Letizia Ramolino. These are his parents. And among them, they had only 13 children. They had only 13 children. Those days it was common. And out of these 13 children, only 8 survived. So out of 13 children, they had 8 survived. The rest, 5 of them died. And among the 8 who survived, these are the 8 children. Of course, one is missing. I did not get that person's name. So 8 children were born, 8 were surviving out of the 13, and Napoleon was the second. His other siblings were Joseph, Lucien, Elise, Louis, Pauline, and Caroline. So these are his siblings, and he was the second among the 8 survived children of his parents. Now, from a young age, Napoleon desired to join the army. That was he had a desire to join the army, and his parents enrolled him in a military institute at a place called Bryn. So you see here, he finished his elementary education at Ajaccio, so his primary schooling at Ajaccio, and then at the age of 10 years, you see he was born in 1769, okay, and when he was 1779, that is, when he was about 10 years old, he was made to join a military institute at a place called Bryn. Okay, so he joined this military institute. He was enrolled in this military institute. And that is a time when he was undergoing his military training at the young age of 10 years. This was for 5 years. He had to undergo a military training for 5 years. He lost his father. Charles Bonaparte died. And the burden of running the family fell upon his mother, Letizia Ramolino. And with great difficulty, she was able to make both her ends meet. She had to also give fees for the education of his ward, Napoleon, and also take care of the children. So, with great difficulty, she somehow managed. She also worked as a domestic servant in the houses of noblemen, and she was able to meet the cost of education of her son, Napoleon Bonaparte. And when Napoleon was undergoing his military training, he had developed a love for reading poetry, poetry of Homer, Ossian. These are all great ancient Greek and Roman poets. So he developed a love for poetry of Homer, particularly. Homer was an ancient Greek poet, and he used to write letters to his mother. Frequently, he would write letters from his military institute to his mother. And in one such letter, he writes, "With a sword by my side and Homer in my pocket, I would like to carve my way through the world." That's what Napoleon is supposed to have written. "With a sword by my hand and Homer in my pocket, I would like to carve my way through the world." Now, he finished his military training when he was about 15 years old. He finished his military training, 5 years of military training at Brünn. And then for 1 year advanced military training, he came to Paris. So you have an institute called École Militaire Supérieure. So this was the military school which gave advanced military training, right? So he came there, and then in 1785 he joined the army. So he was enrolled as an officer when he was about 16 years old, young Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, it is not necessary to make running notes. Understand the topic. I told you what to focus on. What I'll tell you again what to focus on. Just hold on. I Stay with me. Nilanjana Das. So he finished his military training and he was a young officer in the French army. And that is a time when we have revolts breaking out in France between the supporters of monarchy, that is the royalists. Royalists are supporters of monarchy, and then the revolutionary republicans, the Jacobins, who wanted to establish a republic in France. And then you have the royalists, the pro monarchists. So you have disorder in France, various parts of France. You have disorder, revolt going on between the Jacobins and the royalists, like, for example, Valence, Loyens, Auxonne, etc. And young Napoleon was given the responsibility of putting down these revolts. He was an army officer. He had to do his job. And please understand, his sentiments lay with the Republicans. He was a commoner. He was a member of the commoners, the third estate. And his sentiments, his heart and mind was with the commoners, the third estate. Third estate. But still, he had to do the job entrusted to him. And either way, he sympathized with the Republican side. His sympathies were with the Republican side, though he put down those revolts. So he was promoted as first lieutenant. So he became first lieutenant from an ordinary officer. He became a first lieutenant when he was about 21 years old. Right. So you see the steady rise of Napoleon. From an ordinary officer, he becomes first lieutenant when he was about 21 years old. He had put on those revolts which had taken place between the royalists and the Jacobins. Now let us understand Napoleon during the course of the revolution. What all happened during the course of the revolution? As you all know, in 1789, you have the outbreak of the revolution. Revolution broke out in France, and in 1793, the king was guillotined. That is, Louis the 16th was guillotined, and you have the Reign of Terror, which was brought into existence. And six countries declared war against France. Six countries declared war against France, and out of the six countries, France was able to defeat four. Four countries were defeated: Spain, Sardinia, Holland. Right? They were all defeated, and only two remained to be tackled: England and Austria. England and Austria remained to be tackled by France. So the European coalition of four countries were defeated out of the six. Now we have something called the Siege of Toulon. Napoleon and the Siege of Toulon. Now look here. Toulon was on the northern parts of France. It was on the Mediterranean coast. It was on the Mediterranean coast. And this was the greatest naval arsenal of France. This was an important strategically located port within France. So if I imagine this is France, I'm just giving a hypothetical example. This is Toulon here. This is Toulon. And this is the Mediterranean Sea. Okay. Now, you have how many people living here? What was the population of Toulon? This is France, and Toulon was a part of France, and this was a strategically located port or a harbor. There were 25,000 citizens living in Toulon. That was the population of Toulon. Then they were all pro monarchy. They were supporters of monarchy, of the Bourbons. They were supporters of the Bourbons, the population of Toulon. And because of the revolutionary changes happening in France, because the Jacobins, were targeting the royalists, the and pro-monarchists, about 10,000 people from southern France had come to Toulon and taken shelter. So they have come away from southern France, these pro-monarchists, and they had taken shelter in Toulon. And British ships used to enter Toulon, load and unload goods as if they are part of Britain, and then sail out. British ships used to enter Toulon as if it was a part of Britain, then load and unload goods, and then sail away. And there was a fear on the part of the National Convention that England might conquer Toulon because here the population is pro monarchy. And again, 10,000 people from southern France have taken shelter in Toulon, and English ships are coming and going out of Toulon very easily. So, initially, what the National Convention it did is it sent an army to secure Toulon, to secure Toulon for France. But then this revolutionary army of France was repelled. It was defeated. So therefore, the National Convention entrusted the responsibility to Napoleon. Napoleon was given the charge of securing Toulon for France. So what Napoleon did is he took command of the French army and he attacked Toulon. And he used severe artillery. He used heavy bombardment. You can see here Napoleon is using artillery, and he was able to destroy the Red Fort of the Royalists. So there was a fort there called the Red Fort. He destroyed the Red Fort, and he was able to secure Toulon for France. So the National Convention was very, very happy with what Napoleon had done, and they immediately promoted him as Brigadier General. So from first lieutenant, he becomes Brigadier General. Are you there with me, all of you? Toulon was a port city on the Mediterranean Sea. It was inside France, strategically located, right? And all the people living in Toulon were pro-monarchists. They were supporting monarchy, right? And British ships used to enter Toulon and go out easily. And there was a possibility of England conquering Toulon, which France did not want. And ultimately, it was Napoleon who did the job of securing Toulon by destroying the Red Fort of the Royalists. And he was immediately promoted as Brigadier General. Are you there with me? Clear, all of you. Then we move on. You see here, we have two countries who were yet to be defeated by France. France had defeated 4 out of the 6 countries. Two remained to be tackled, and the National Convention decided to tackle Austria first. You see here on your screen, in 1795, France was under the National Convention and the Directory, and it decided to tackle Austria and England now. 4 countries had been defeated already. And out of Austria and England, the National Convention first decided to tackle Austria. Understand this, please? Okay, I seek your attention. It decided to tackle Austria first. Now, during those days, you see here on your screen, Austria was ruling Austria proper, and a part of Italian peninsula was ruled by Austria. I repeat, Austria was ruling over Austria, and a part of Italian peninsula was also under the control of Austria. So a two-pronged attack was planned on Austria, attacking Austria and Austria, and attacking Austria in the Italian peninsula. Did you understand? Attacking, as you see here, I have made a, 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 a picture here. You have a two-pronged attack on Austria planned, attacking Austria and attacking Austria in the Italian peninsula. And the second job was entrusted to Napoleon. That is, Napoleon was given the responsibility of defeating the Austrians in the Italian peninsula. Can you raise your hands till now? Are you clear, all of you? No doubts? So, Austria was ruling over Austria and over a part of Italy. A two-pronged attack was planned on Austria. And Napoleon was given the job of tackling the Austrians in the Italian peninsula. Can you raise your hands? Hello? Am I able to? Am I audible? All of you? Hello? Okay. Can I continue now? So attacking Austria and attacking Austria in the Italian peninsula. And the second job was entrusted to Napoleon. That is attacking Austria in the Italian peninsula. And you see here, this is the map of Italy on your screen. So this is the map of Italy, and we have three powers who came together to fight against Napoleon. You have Austria. You see, Austria is here. We have Sardinia, the kingdom of Sardinia, Piedmont, and then the Papal States, the Pope. You have the Pope here. So you see here, Austria, Sardinia, and Pope came together versus Napoleon. So when Napoleon attacked the Austrians in the Italian peninsula, three powers joined together to fight against France and Napoleon. That is Austria, Sardinia, and the Pope. And a number of battles were fought, like this: Montenotte, Dego, Melistenovo. Don't worry about that. Carsuglia, Ciracoro, Lodi, Mantua, Arcoli, Rivoli. These are the various battles which were fought in the Italian peninsula. And in all these battles, Napoleon was able to defeat all the three. He was able to defeat this coalition of Austria, Sardinia, and the Pope. Right? So he has successfully defeated the Austrians in the Italian peninsula. He has defeated Austria in the Italian peninsula. Then what happened? Napoleon crossed the Alps mountains. You see here, I'll show you the map here. You see the map here, you see the arrow mark here. See the arrow mark here? These are the arrow mark. You see this arrow mark? This is the Alps mountains. So he crossed the Alps mountains with his army and he decided to attack Austria, right? And he crossed the Alps mountains and he landed at a place called Loben, and he was just 100 miles away from Vienna, the capital of Austria. And the Austrian monarch was frightened. He sued for peace. In other words, he accepted defeat and he sued for peace. And we have a treaty called the Treaty of Campo Formio, which was signed. So Napoleon initially defeated the Austrians in the Italian peninsula, and then he crossed the Alps mountains. You see here, Napoleon crosses the Alps mountains, landed at a place called Loben, just 100 miles away from Vienna, the capital of Austria. And the Austrian monarch sued for peace. He asked for peace. As a result, the Treaty of Campo Formio was signed. So Napoleon was able to successfully defeat the Austrians both in the Italian peninsula as well as in Austria proper. What this is called the first Italian campaigns of Napoleon, the first Italian campaigns of Napoleon Bonaparte. What is the significance of the first Italian campaigns of Napoleon Bonaparte? First of all, Austrian authority over the Italian peninsula came to an end. Austria was ruling over a part of the Italian peninsula. That came to an end. This is number one. Number two, Austria surrendered Austrian Netherlands to France. You see here on your screen. On your screen, this is Austria. Look at the map here. Without a map, you cannot understand world history. So I have put a lot of maps for our convenience. Now look here on your screen. Austria is here. And where is Netherlands? Netherlands is here. And a part of Netherlands was under the control of Austria. That's called Austrian Netherlands. And Austria used to find it very difficult to administer Austrian Netherlands. Why? Because this is the German-speaking area. These are all the German-speaking area in between. Very difficult to administer Netherlands effectively. Therefore, Austria voluntarily withdrew from Austrian Netherlands. So Austria had to surrender Austrian Netherlands to France. So she gave away Austrian Netherlands to France. Okay. Then after defeating the Austrians in the Italian peninsula, we have Napoleon creating two republics, Cisalpine and Ligurian republics. You see here, we have two republics, Cisalpine and Ligurian republics. He entrusted the responsibility of running the affairs of these republics to the Italians themselves. Now, please understand, during those days, the Italian peninsula was politically fragmented. This is the Italian peninsula, right? And you have many kings ruling over small kingdoms within Italy. There was no unity amongst those kings. And they used to not take care of their people properly. They were ruling like dictators. Now, what did Napoleon do? After defeating the Austrians in the Italian peninsula, he created two republics within the Italian peninsula. He called them Cisalpine and Ligurian republics. And he entrusted the responsibility of running the affairs of these republics to the Italians themselves. Italians were given the job of running the affairs of their republics themselves, these two republics, Cisalpine and Ligurian republics. And that kindled the spirit of nationalism amongst the Italians. So they felt very happy after hundreds of years. Some part of Italy was ruled or governed by the Italians themselves, and that kindled the spirit of nationalism or love towards their country on the part of the Italians. And this was the work of Napoleon. And that's why Napoleon is called the father of Italian nationalism and liberalism. Liberalism is what? Liberalism is the desire to establish a parliamentary form of government. So here, the Italians were given the job of running the affairs of these republics themselves. And Napoleon was the one who gave this responsibility. So that kindled the spirit of nationalism and liberalism amongst the Italians. And then what happened? He collected Renaissance paintings from the Italian peninsula and he brought them and kept them in the Paris Museum. If you remember, Italy was the home of Renaissance. Renaissance had happened there. And you have many lovely paintings which were available in the Italian peninsula. Once he defeated the Austrians in the Italian peninsula, he took away all those Renaissance era paintings, paintings of Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, etc., and he kept them in the Paris Museum. This is the significance of the first Italian campaigns of Napoleon. Are you there with me, all of you? No, you don't worry about that. Who ruled Cisalpine and all that? He created two republics, right? There were no republics there. These were, Italy was having small kingdoms ruled by kings, and there was no unity amongst these kings. Neither did they take care of their people properly. So, after having conquered a part of Italy, after defeating the Austrians, he established two republics within the Italian peninsula and entrusted the responsibility of running the republics to those Italians themselves. And that kindled the spirit of nationalism and liberalism amongst the Italians. Are you there with me? So here, Napoleon has successfully fulfilled the job which had been given to him by the National Convention. That is, they wanted him to defeat Austria in Italian peninsula, which he did successfully. Then he crossed the Alps mountains and defeated Austria also. An Austrian emperor sued for peace, and the Treaty of Campo Formio was signed. Right? Are you there with me, all of you? Can you raise your hands quickly so that I can move on? So, out of the 6 countries, 5 countries have been defeated now by France, isn't it? 5 countries have been defeated. Only one remained to be tackled. Which is that one country to be tackled? England. England was yet to be defeated. Okay, now look here. The National Convention now enters the responsibility of defeating England to Napoleon Bonaparte. Garima, I have repeated twice already. If I keep repeating 3-4 times, I might run out of time and I'll not be able to finish the syllabus. So you listen to the recorded version of it. I have repeated 2-3 times. And I understand this is first time you're listening to world history. A lot of things are there to remember. But then I want you to understand. Everything is not important. But then you need to understand. We'll come back here. Egyptian. So please explain briefly again. Okay. Garima, look here for you. I told you out of the 2 countries, Austria and England, the National Convention decided to tackle Austria. And Austria during those days was ruling over Austria proper and the Italian peninsula. Napoleon was able to defeat the Austrians in both the places, in the Italian peninsula as well as in Austria. And within the Italian peninsula, he created 2 republics and entrusted the responsibility of running the republics to the Italians themselves. And that kindled the spirit of nationalism and liberalism amongst the Italians, for which Napoleon is called as the father of Italian nationalism and liberalism. Right? And of course, Austria had to surrender Austrian Netherlands to France. And he collected Italian paintings from Italy, Renaissance era paintings from Italy, and kept them in the Paris Museum. And of course, Austrian authority over the Italian peninsula came to an end. Are you there with me? Clear? Now, the next part is the Egyptian campaigns of Napoleon. Now, look here. The National Convention now enters the responsibility of defeating England to Napoleon. And Napoleon, in this context, decided to attack Egypt. You see here on your screen, this is Egypt. And Egypt was a protectorate of England. This is Egypt for you. And it was a protectorate of England. That is, England was giving protection to Egypt. Right? She was under the protection of England, Egypt. Now, What was the plan of Napoleon? Understand this, please. He wanted to conquer Egypt, and then from Egypt, he wanted to come to India. Understand this, please. He wanted to come to India. And when he was busy in his Egyptian campaign, I'll come to that. When he was busy in his Egyptian campaign fighting against the Egyptians, Tipu Sultan sent an ambassador to Napoleon Bonaparte asking for help, and Tipu responded positively. I'll come to that in some time. Just hold on. So here, Egypt was a protectorate of England. She was under the control of England. In other words, England was ruling over Egypt indirectly. And whenever Egypt was in a trouble, if somebody attacked Egypt, England will give protection to Egypt. So therefore, instead of directly attacking England, it decided to attack England indirectly by attacking Egypt. So what did Napoleon do? He took his army, he deployed his army on ships, and he crossed the Mediterranean Sea. You see, this is the Mediterranean Sea. He crosses the Mediterranean Sea, then he attacks Egypt. We have the Battle of Pyramids, which takes place. Egypt, during those days, was ruled by a king who had the title of Pasha. So the king of Egypt was called Pasha, the Pasha of Egypt. So there was a war, Battle of Pyramids. This is the Battle of Pyramids. On your screen, you see, this is the Battle of Pyramids, July 1798. And in this Battle of Pyramids, it was Napoleon who was able to defeat the Pasha. And Cairo was conquered. Cairo was the capital of Egypt. So Cairo was occupied by Napoleon. And therefore, now England lost Egypt to France because Napoleon has conquered Egypt by defeating the Pasha. And England wanted to restore her position over Egypt. So what happened is next month, so in July 1798, he has conquered Egypt. In August 1798, look how quickly the British have acted. They sent a fleet. The British sent a fleet to take back Egypt from France. And this resulted in the Battle of Nile. We have the Battle of Nile, which takes place. Nelson versus Napoleon. Nelson versus Napoleon. You have an admiral called Nelson who was sent by England to fight against France. And this was a naval battle. You see, France had a very powerful army under Napoleon, and Britain had a very, very powerful navy. Britain did not have a strong army, but Britain had a great navy, very powerful navy. Now you have the Battle of Nile, which takes place. In the battle, this is Nelson for you, Admiral Nelson. He was a genius on the sea, on the oceans. Just as Napoleon was a genius on the battlefield, Nelson was a genius on the oceans. And we have the English fleet bombarding the French fleet. And the French fleet was destroyed. French fleet was destroyed. Major part of French fleet was destroyed. And Napoleon barely escaped with his life. This is the Battle of Nile. Now, Napoleon, once he was defeated by Nelson, he somehow gathered whatever ships he had with him and he attacked Syria. You can see here, Syria was also a protectorate of England. So he tried to attack Syria. This is Syria for you. See here, this is Syria. Syria. So he attacked Syria, trying to conquer Syria. But then he failed to conquer Syria. And somehow he managed to escape into France. So and again, Egypt was reconquered by England. Did you understand? So the Egyptian campaign of Napoleon was a failure. Initially, he conquered Egypt, but he lost it very next month to England. And what is the significance of the Egyptian campaigns of Napoleon? You see, this was an article in the newspaper. In the Hindu newspaper, there was an article sometime back, about a few months back. It talked about impact of Napoleon's Egyptian campaign. So Napoleon, when he went to fight against Egypt, he took along with him a number of experts, historians, architects, painters, sketch artists, etc. And that is the beginning of Egyptology, the study of Egypt, the history of Egypt. So it was documented by all these officers of Napoleon. Almost more than 160 officers were taken by him, scholars, literateurs, painters, sketch artists, engineers, to study about the pyramids and everything about Egypt. So that resulted in the birth of Egyptology. And he also took away a number of artifacts from Egypt. So that is the beginning of robbing Egypt of all its historical artifacts, and he took them and kept them in the Paris Museum. Okay, so that was in the newspaper. I have put that same thing here. Okay, the same article. I have put it in the form of a Word file here. Please go through it. It is out of interest. Okay, now come back here. So Napoleon, I told you, he's French. His fleet was defeated. He tried to conquer Syria. He failed. Somehow he escaped into France and he overthrew the National Convention and established the consular government. I'm coming back here. You see here on your screen. 1799, he reached France. You see, Napoleon was defeated by Nelson. He tried to conquer Syria, but that was a failure. So in 1799, he somehow escaped to France and overthrew the Directory. Remember, what is the Directory? It consisted of 5 directors. Now, Napoleon was absent from France. Who was running France? The National Convention was running France. And what was the executive authority under the National Convention? The Directory. So this National Convention and the Directory was very, very corrupt, and people of France were very angry with the way their country was run by the National Convention and the Directory. So Napoleon took the help of some directors, right? And with the help of those directors, he overthrew the National Convention and the Directory and established what is called the consular government. And he himself became the consular. He himself became the first consul. So we have a third government which comes into existence in France that is called the consular government. On your screen, the consular government. This was in existence for 5 years, 1799 to 1804. What did Napoleon do? He overthrew the National Convention and also the Constitution of 1795. If you remember, National Assembly had brought out the Constitution of 1791, the 1791 Constitution. That was replaced. National Assembly was replaced by the National Convention, and the National Convention brought out the Constitution of 1795, isn't it? Now, Napoleon, he overthrew the National Convention and established the consular government. He established the consular government and brought out a new constitution that is called the Consular Constitution. That is called the Consular Constitution. And in this Consular Constitution, he himself became the first consul. He became the first consul. And as first consul of France, he had tremendous powers. He almost became a dictator of France. How it happened, I'll tell you later. And he fooled the people of France. He fooled the people of France and he assumed all powers in his hands. This consular government was in existence for 5 years, 1799 to 1804. Then, in the year 1804, Napoleon declared himself as Emperor of France, and he was Emperor of France from 1804 to 1814. So, consular government was replaced by the monarchy in France, where Napoleon became the emperor. 1804 to 1814. Did you understand the thread here? Did you understand the thread? All of you, the sequence of events: National Assembly, National Convention. The National Convention is overthrown by Napoleon. He establishes the consular government, and later he becomes the Emperor of France. Are you there with me? Okay. Now let us go for a break. Let's go for a break, and we meet at what time? Now it is 6:32. We'll meet at 6:40, 6:42, 6:45. Come back at 6:45. 6:45 we meet. 6:45 p.m. And my humble request is please keep on revising after every topic. Revise those topics before you come and attend the next day's class. Otherwise, you'll forget. And it is the nature of the human mind to forget 40% within 24 hours. Whatever you learned, you lose we forget 60% according to statistics, not according to me. So please revise. That's the only way to remember things. Okay. Okay, we'll come back here. So constitutional monarchy, absolute monarchy replaced by constitutional monarchy, then National Convention made it a republic, then we have a consular government. We'll come to that. So we come back at 6:45, please. We'll continue the story of Napoleon. So he was emperor 1804 to 1814. He was emperor of France. Okay, carry on. Good evening, everyone. Once again, can we continue the story of Napoleon? Hello, all of you. Right. Everybody is back, I hope. Am I audible and visible? Okay, thank you. So here, Napoleon had successfully defeated the Austrians both in the Italian peninsula as well as in Austria proper. He tried to conquer Egypt. He did succeed initially, but then England wrested Egypt back from Napoleon. He tried to conquer Syria after that, but he failed. And then somehow he escaped to France, overthrew the National Convention and the Directory, and established the so called consular government and brought out a new constitution for France known as the Consular Constitution. This consular government was in existence for 5 years, 1799 to 1804. Now, let us look at the various reforms which Napoleon brought within France as the first council, the so called first council. Now, look here on your screen. So, this is again factual information. We will run through it. So, it's again factual information. Reforms of Napoleon. I have my own doubts whether they will ask in UPSC General Studies. Optionally, it becomes relevant, but it's good to know. But then because it will help us to analyze Napoleon later at the end of this session, end of this particular topic. But again, from the exam point of view, not very important. Now let us look at the reforms of Napoleon. You see, if it is said that if the conquests of Napoleon were ephemeral means temporary. If the conquests of Napoleon were temporary, if the conquests of Napoleon were temporary or ephemeral, his civilian work is built upon granite. That is, many of the reforms of Napoleon have stood the test of time. Even now, many of the reforms of Napoleon are existing in some way or the other, not only in France, but in other parts of Europe, wherever they had been introduced by Napoleon. And that's why the saying, his conquests were temporary, but his civilian work is built upon granite. Now, once he establishes the consular government, he brought out a number of reforms. We have a consular constitution, which replaced the constitution of 1795. Then he brought about financial reforms, educational reforms, etc. We will look at it. First of all, consular constitution. So this constitution replaced the constitution of 1795, which had been brought into existence by the National Convention. This consular constitution was written by Sayes, one of the directors. His name was Sayes. It was drawn or written by Sayes and adequately, appropriately amended by Napoleon. So wherever Napoleon required it, he amended this constitution. Under this constitution, legislative functions were in the hands of three organs. You have a council of state, a tribunate, and a legislative body. You look here, look at this aspect, please. Closely observe. We have the legislative functions under three organs. Council of State, it drafted all the laws and bills. It wrote or drafted all the laws and bills. The tribunate discussed without voting, and the legislative body voted without discussion. Right. So these are the three organs. One only wrote the drafted the bills. Other body only discussed it, and the third one voted it without discussion. Above all these three organs was another body called the Senate. This was higher than the above three. That is, it was higher than the Council of State, Tribunate, and the legislative body. It consisted of 80 members. The Senate consisted of 80 members, and they were irremovable. You could not remove them from their position. So till they die, they remain as members of the Senate. And this Senate was the one which appointed the members of the Council of State, that is the councils, the members of the tribunate, as well as that of the legislative body. And it could cancel any law contrary to the principles of the consular constitution. So if the consular constitution, if any law is against the consular constitution, it could cancel it. So this was the legislative organ, where you have three organs: Council of State, Tribunate, and Legislative Body, and then a Senate which was superior to all the other three. And they were irremovable. 80 members were irremovable. Then the executive authority. The executive body authority was in the hands of three councils: first council, second council, third council. So they are called the three councils, as you can see. Napoleon himself became the first council. So he himself became the first council, and as first council, all the powers were in the hands of Napoleon. So he could promulgate laws, he could make laws, he could declare war, declare peace, appoint ministers, ambassadors, officials, both civil and military. So he could do anything he wanted. All the powers were in the hands of Napoleon, right? And the other two councils only had consultative powers. So he established three councils. The other two were dummies, no powers with them, only consultative powers. They could only be consulted, but they could not do anything. And all the powers was in the hands of Napoleon. Then he centralized the local administration of France. You remember, we have departments, cantons, communes, and cities. All the heads of these departments were elected by or appointed by Napoleon. So here, Napoleon centralized the local administration, heads of cantons, that is prefects, heads of communes, sub-prefects, and the heads of cities, mayors. They were all appointed by the first council. Generally speaking, they should be elected. Strictly speaking, they should have been elected. But here, Napoleon is appointing them. And then he established the Secretariat of the State, which later became the Ministry of State. So it was to supervise and control the work of ministers. But they did not have any collective responsibility. So ministers did not have any collective responsibility. Only individually they were responsible to Napoleon. So here you see it looked to the people of France that he is following Montesquieu's separation of powers. Did you understand here, all of you? It looked like he was fooling the people of France. He made it appear that he is following the separation of powers, but he kept all the powers in his hands. You have three organs: legislature, executive, judiciary was there, but all the powers was in the hands of Napoleon. And people did not understand this. People of France did not realize that part. Right. Then we move on. We have financial reforms. We have financial reforms brought out by Napoleon. So let us look at the financial reforms. Okay, so he centralized the assessment and collection of taxes. He centralized the assessment and collection of taxes. Then he maintained rigid economy, that is, he curtailed useless expenditure, and he punished corrupt officials and reduced the military expenditure. He forced the defeated countries to meet the expenditure of the French army. So if France went to war against some other country and the other country was defeated, he forced the expenditure on of the French army on that defeated country, and that way he saved a lot of money for France. And also he established the Bank of France. These are the various financial reforms brought out by Napoleon. Okay, centralized assessment and collection of taxes, maintained rigid economy, that is, he curtailed useless expenditure of the government. Useless expenditure of the government was curtailed. Then he punished the corrupt officials and reduced the military expenditure and established the Bank of France, which is considered to be one of the finest financial institutions of Europe even now. These are the financial reforms he brought in. Then he also brought about educational reforms. Now, Napoleon was a person who gave a lot of importance to elementary education, the primary education. No, because he believed that is where the future citizens of France come from. The future citizens of France are the children of France. So therefore, he gave a lot of importance to elementary education. So schools were established in almost all the cantons and communes, and they were under the respective heads of those cantons and communes. That is prefects and sub-prefects. They were the heads of those schools. Grammar schools were established, lycees, high schools, normal schools for teacher training, then special schools like civil service schools, military schools. So all these were established by Napoleon, and he also established the University of Paris. And all the educational institutions were brought under the University of Paris, and the university officials were directly appointed by Napoleon. Did you understand? Further, he also gave importance to women's education. He wanted to create women of charm, not just women of charm, but women of virtue. So he wanted the women of France to learn all these subjects: writing, arithmetic, elementary, French, history, geography, physics, music, dancing, etc. So he gave a lot of importance to women's education. As he says, he doesn't want just women of charm, but of virtue. And then, of course, all educational institutions were supposed to strictly adhere to the tenets of the university, the head of the state, and also ethical principles of Christianity. So they were supposed to give top priority to all these things: ethical principles of Christianity, the statutes of the university, and also the loyalty to the head of the state. And he also established Institute of France, where people who had done meritorious services, work in physics, chemistry, mathematics, etc., they were adequately rewarded. These are the various educational reforms brought about by Napoleon. Right. Then we move on. We come to public works. So Napoleon used the prisoners of war to improve the public works of France. So he used POWs, that is prisoners of war, and a number of public works took place under him. He improved the transport and communication facilities of France. So that promoted trade, commerce, and industry. Once transport and communication facilities were improved, that aided the development of trade, industry, commerce, etc. Then he also built a number of military roads, two trans-alpine roads across the Alps mountains. We have roads built by Napoleon and military roads, and of course the border. Paris was connected with the border areas by through border roads, right? And also you have Milan, Turin, Naples, and Rome connected to Paris. So bridges were constructed, marshes were drained, dikes were strengthened, and also he built a number of seaports, both for commercial and military purposes. So he also promoted public works, right? Then, so these are the roads, major roads built by Napoleon. He improved upon the roads which already existed in France. And as I told you, when I did French Revolution, roads had been built by the time during the ancient Roman times, by the Roman emperors. And then you have the Bourbons and other French emperors who had improved upon those roads. And even Napoleon improved those roads. Further, Napoleon brought about religious reforms. You see, Napoleon understood that the people of France were very unhappy with the civil constitution of the clergy. Remember, all the clergy people of France had to sign this document called Civil Constitution of Clergy, and virtually France had been de-Christianized during the National Assembly. What did the National Assembly do? It had taken away all the church property, and keeping that as security, paper currency called assignats had been introduced. Right, number of bishops had been reduced, and they were to be elected by the people and paid by the state. And the Pope's authority over the bishops had been made nominal. That is the civil constitution of the clergy. And Napoleon understood, but people of France were not happy with whatever he had done, whatever the National Assembly had done earlier. Whenever he went on a ride in his carriage, in his chariot, in the various cities of France, what he noticed is people were standing outside the churches. They had the lit candles outside the church because the church doors were locked. Church had been closed as an institution by the National Assembly. Okay, and then it continued even later, though to an extent it had been restored, but still it remained the same. So people he saw were lighting candles outside the church, and they were praying before the church. Though they were standing outside, and he realized that religion is necessary for people. Religion is necessary for people, and he decided to give the same to the people. So he therefore entered into an agreement with the Pope, and that is called Concordat. So what is this Concordat? Under this Concordat, Roman Catholicism was recognized as the major religion of the people of France, and the Pope's authority over those confiscated property was restored. So Roman Catholicism was declared as the religion of the majority of the people of France, and absolute religious toleration was accorded or introduced. Then earlier, the Pope had lost all the property, all the right to the property. Now that was restored back to the Pope. All the clergy people of France had to take an oath of loyalty to the state. They were to be maintained by the state. Clergy will be maintained by the state, and they had to take an oath of loyalty to the state. But they'll be ordained by the Pope. What is ordaining? Ordaining is conferring holiness. The Pope is the only person who can confer holiness upon a clergy. That's called ordaining, right? And of course, so these are the reforms brought about by Napoleon. And in other words, he restored the Roman Catholic Church into France, and people were very, very happy with what Napoleon had done. In fact, he had read their mind and he gave back what they desired, and he was able to read their mind. And thus, this way, Napoleon used religion for his political purposes. He used religion for his political purposes. He became very, very popular in France. People, were ready to listen to him. And whatever dissent was there against him, that to a large extent disappeared because of this fact that he had restored the Roman Catholic Church. Did you understand? This is called the Concordat. Then you can see here the signing of the Concordat by Pope and Napoleon. Yeah, obviously, prisoners of war. If prisoners of war are used to are forced to work in improving the public works, they're almost like laborers, bonded laborers, isn't it? Um, so did you understand, Jaswant? Not slavery. They are more like bonded laborers. They have no choice but to work on those public works. Ramandeep, Concordat, I told you. The thing is, this was an agreement between the Pope and Napoleon, by which Roman Catholicism was reintroduced into France, and that was recognized as the dominant religion of the masses of the people of France. It was not the state religion; it was recognized as the religion of the majority people of France. And absolute religious toleration was accorded. That is, there are other sects within Christianity, like the Protestant church and other churches. They will not be troubled in any way, though Roman Catholicism is the religion of the majority of the people of France. And of course, all the clergy people of France had to take an oath of loyalty to the state, and they would be maintained by the state. But then they'll be ordained by the Pope, that is, conferring holiness upon them. And the church property was restored back to the Pope. Thus, this way, he used religion for his political purposes. Right? Then we have the codes of Napoleon. You see, the National Convention had made an attempt to codify the laws of France. Now, it was not fully successful. Napoleon was able to build upon whatever the National Convention had done with respect to the legal codes. Now, Napoleon has been called as a second Justinian for that reason. This is supposed to be the greatest work of Napoleon. Justinian, the first Justinian was one of the Roman emperors who codified laws. For example, in India we have Manu Dharma Shastra, or Manu Charita, or Manava Dharma Shastra. Manu is supposed to be the ancient lawgiver, the first lawgiver of India. Manu Dharma Shastra or Manava Dharma Shastra. And who is called modern Manu? Modern Manu. Who is called modern Manu? Dr. B.R. Ambedkar for his Hindu Code Bill. He's called modern Manu. Similarly, Napoleon is called second Justinian, as opposed to the ancient Roman emperor called Justinian. And he was the one who codified the laws of France. In this context, we have a number of codes which were brought about by Napoleon. The first is a civil code. So this was drawn or written by a committee of lawyers appointed by Napoleon. And what is the civil code? Understand this, very simple. This factual information, that's why I'm running through it. It's very easy also. What is a civil code? The authority of the father over the family members was strengthened. So the patriarchal system was strengthened further. So father was the head of the house in France. Okay, the household was run by the father, and his powers were strengthened. So much so that he could even arrest his children. He can get his children arrested if they did not listen to him. Right? This was the law made by Napoleon, where the father of a family, who's the head of the house, can get his children arrested if they did not listen to him. And then his consent, the father's consent, was necessary for their marriage. Let us say a boy, no, a son wants to marry a girl, and the father says no, then he cannot marry. His consent was necessary for their marriage, right? And a wife was to be under the control of her husband. Very interesting. A wife was to be under the control of her husband, and his consent was necessary for their marriage. If the husband says, I will not marry you, then there's no marriage. Now, please understand, don't blame Napoleon for this. These are, he was a product of his age. He was a product of his age and environment, and we are all products of our environment and age, right? And he belonged to a different time, and he belonged to a different society, and he brought these things because he felt that is the right thing to do at that point in time, right? So here, a wife was to be under the control of her husband, and his consent was necessary for their marriage. Right. Then he permitted divorce. In his civil code, he permitted divorce. Divorce was not allowed in the Roman Catholic Church, but he permitted divorce, and on the grounds of adultery, cruelty, and grave criminal offenses. And then a man could not dispose of more than half of his property. What is the meaning of this? He could not dispose of half his property, more than half of his property. Let's say a person has four houses. Okay, he has four houses and he has 10 children. Now, this person called A has four houses. He owns four houses and he's got 10 children. Now, in his lifetime, he can sell away two houses only, not more than two houses. He can sell away two houses and he has to keep the other two houses. Why? For his children. This is a law made by Napoleon, right? So, a man could not dispose of more than half of his property. This is the civil code. Then we have the code of civil procedure. What is this code of civil procedure? Before going to a court, you try to solve the matter amicably out of the court, what is called out of court settlement, right? If you go to the court, it will take a lot of time, headache, procedure, money, etc. So he suggested to people try to solve your problems outside the court without going to the law court. But once you have decided to go to the law court, then you can hire your lawyers, you can produce documents, and also produce witnesses to prove your innocence. And trial was to be held in public. There was no private trial. Trial was in front of everybody, public trial. And you have jury system introduced. These are the code of civil procedure. Then we have the criminal and penal codes. So for criminal offenses, what is called criminal offenses, a number of punishments were meted out. Of course, you have, they were imprisoned. You have capital punishment. What is capital punishment? Death sentence. So death sentence was given. They were deported outside the country. Deportation was there, and also confiscation of goods. Their goods can be confiscated. Property can be confiscated. So all these were the criminal and penal codes. Further, we have commercial codes like codes dealing with general commerce, maritime commerce, etc. But the commercial codes of Napoleon did not become very popular. Right? These are the codes of Napoleon. Right? Of course, you see the codes of Napoleon were introduced even in those countries over which France gained victories. So, if France defeated a particular country, these codes were introduced or extended even in those countries. And many harsh punishments were there in this Napoleonic codes. The position of women were distinctly inferior to that of men, right? All that was there. These are some of the defects. But at the same time, he gave a common system of law to the people of France. The law was common and introduced social equality. At least on paper, people felt that he is treating everybody equally, in the society, and you have a common system of law for everybody in France. This is one of the greatest contributions of Napoleon, the Napoleonic codes. Further, he also tried to promote arts. So you see, the important cities of France, particularly Paris, was beautified with large roads, broad roads, fountains, boulevards, gardens, and as a result, the population of Paris increased. Why population of Paris increased? If we beautified Paris, people from other parts of France began to come to Paris and settle down there. That's how the population increased. Okay, so he enlarged and beautified the state palaces. He also established a museum, the Louvre, the National Museum of Paris. So that's where he kept all the Renaissance era paintings, which he looted from Italy and kept it there. And this happens to be the biggest museum in the world even now. This is the biggest museum in the world, the Louvre Museum in Paris. This had been established earlier. It was enlarged by Napoleon, and Napoleon is credited for the Louvre Museum. And of course, Paris was beautified, right? Then Napoleon also tried to establish a colonial empire. He wanted a colony, colonial empire like England. He wanted colonies for France. But whenever he tried to establish a colonial empire, all his plans were spoiled by England. We'll come to that in some time. All his plans were spoiled by England. And it costed so much of money for Napoleon that he was fighting all these wars. So he sold away Louisiana to America. This is in 1803. And this is the first acquisition of America after her independence. In 1783, America became independent, right, formally. And in 1803, she acquired Louisiana from France because Napoleon sold away Louisiana to America. And even now, Louisiana is part of America for that reason. Why did he sell away Louisiana? Because he wanted money, right? So these are the various reforms brought about by Napoleon as first council. Are you there with me, all of you? Second code, No, this is the Code of Civil Procedure, Nyson, the Code of Civil Procedure. It is self-explanatory. Go to the PPTs. It is self-explanatory, right? I only summarize whatever is there in the PPTs. Now, let us come back to his wars proper. You see here, remember, go back to his wars. What happened? The National Convention had given the job of defeating Austria to Napoleon, and he did it wonderfully. Well, he had defeated the Austrians in the Italian peninsula, and then he defeated Austria in Austria proper. Then he attacked Egypt and conquered Egypt, but England reconquered Egypt. Then he tried to conquer Syria. He failed, and somehow he reached France, overthrew the National Convention and the Directory, and established the consular government. Now, what happened? We'll come back here. The failure of the Egyptian campaigns led to a coalition against France. So, when he failed against the British, a coalition was formed against France. And please understand, once he was defeated by the British in Egypt, Nelson defeated Napoleon. We have Austria re-establishing her control over the Italian peninsula. Austria re-established her control over the Italian peninsula. In the first Italian campaigns, if you remember, he had defeated the Austrians in the Italian peninsula as well as in Austria, right? And the Treaty of Campo Formio had been signed. So now I come back here. The failure of the Egyptian campaigns of Napoleon resulted in a coalition against France. Three countries joined together: England, Austria, and Russia. You see here, England, Austria, and Russia. They joined together against France. Now, this is the second attempt to defeat, Napoleon. So initially he had been defeated by England. Then second time you have a coalition formed against France. Now, please understand. Let me add a caveat here. Whenever a coalition was formed against France, and in that coalition, Austria was one of the parties, one of the members. Generally, always and always, Napoleon attacked Austria. So if you see here in this coalition, Austria is also one of the members, right? England, Austria, Russia. So first he attacks Austria. And that was the case almost every time. Whenever there was a coalition and Austria is a member of that coalition, he will attack Austria. Now, a two-pronged attack was planned on Austria. I told you, you see here, Austria re-established her control over the Italian peninsula. So part of Italy was again under the control of Austria. So a two-pronged attack was planned on Austria, attacking Austria in Austria and attacking Austria in the Italian peninsula. Right? So he divided his army into two parts. One part he sent to Austria under his general called Morio, and the other part of his army was commanded by Napoleon himself, and he attacked Italy, right, where the part of Italy over which the Austrians were ruling. And this inaugurated the second Italian campaigns of Napoleon. This is known as the second Italian campaigns of Napoleon. So Napoleon crossed the Saint Bernard Pass and he appeared before the Austrians and he defeated them. So second time he defeated the Austrians, and we have a treaty which was signed, the Treaty of Luneville. This was signed between Francis II of Austria and Napoleon, right? And under this treaty of Luneville, the provisions of the Treaty of Campo Formio were recognized. Whatever treaty had been signed earlier after the first Italian campaigns, that was confirmed. Okay, that was confirmed. So you see, he has tackled Austria. He has defeated Austria. So out of the three, he has defeated Austria. Then he turned to Russia. And what did he do? He threatened Tsar Paul. So through tact and guile, he spoke to him. He threatened him. At the same time, he spoke sweet words to him. So tactfully, he was able to win over Russia to his side. So Tsar Paul, the Emperor of Russia, had the title of Tsar. Tsar is the Russian equivalent of Caesar. The Romans used to call their emperors as Caesar, and the Russian equivalent of Caesar is Tsar. So through tact and guile, he won over Tsar Paul of Russia to his side. So Austria had been defeated. Now Russia also left the side of England. He isolated England. He made England one, and then you have something called the armed neutrality. You see here, what is this armed neutrality? In the oceans, so in the various oceans, Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, etc., you have various countries trading, along with their ships. So many countries are having their ships, and they're sailing, they're doing business. Now, England used to suspect that some of the goods, some of the countries are carrying or smuggling French goods. So what will England do? Her ships will stop other foreign country ships. So their navy personnel will enter those ships and they'll start searching for French goods, as if those countries are smuggling French goods. Now, and those countries were very angry with England because you have the English navy stopping their navy in the middle of the ocean. English naval personnel will get onto those ships, they'll board those ships and start searching for goods, for French goods, on mere suspicion. So this was a grievance of these countries. Taking the grievances of these countries into consideration, Napoleon formed a coalition. Okay, so who are the countries who joined this coalition against England? Five countries: France, Austria, Russia, then Denmark and Sweden. You see, France, Austria, Russia, Denmark, Sweden. All these countries had nothing to do with French and English rivalry. But then England will stop the ships of these countries and would search for a possible French goods being smuggled on them. And that was the reason why he formed a coalition. Did you understand? You see here, armed neutrality. Did you understand what I just now told you? England used to search ships of neutral countries of French goods. Taking the grievances of these countries into consideration, Napoleon formed a league. So this was, you see, Russia. Why Russia? Satyapal, because under Napoleon, France could be a threat to any country. Nobody trusted Napoleon Bonaparte. He was a warmonger. So when England and Austria already were targeted by France, you have Russia also joining them, right? Um, okay, we'll come back here. So he now declared war against England. That's called armed neutrality. Right. So, see, why now Gaurav is asking a very relevant question. Why Austria has joined France? Now, look here. There are no, there are, the answer to this would be there are no permanent friends in international politics. Neither are there permanent enemies. You understand? Friends and enemies in international politics keep on changing depending upon a country's national interest. Right? There's nothing personal here. It's only national interest. National interest of a country is supreme. So, depending upon a country's national interest, friends and enemies keep on changing. So, keep that in mind, please. So, here you see earlier, England and Austria had joined together against Napoleon. Now you have the same Austria fighting against England. So, on the side of France. So, this is all national interest. Did you understand? Because England used to even search the goods of ships of Austrian ships. Even the Austrian ships were being checked for French goods. Now, what did England do? You please understand, England during those days had a very powerful navy. You see, she was called the mistress of the oceans. England was called the mistress of the oceans. She ruled the oceans, and 60% of the world's warships were with England. 60% of the world's warships were with England, and she ruled the oceans. She had colonies all over the world. So not only she had a fighting navy, she also had a very powerful merchant marine, a merchant navy. So England sent her genius, Admiral Nelson, to break the back of this coalition. So Nelson, with his fleet, English ships, he attacked Copenhagen. Copenhagen is the capital of Denmark, and Denmark was defeated. And Denmark withdrew from the coalition. So Denmark was defeated. In Russia, Tsar Paul was murdered. There was some internal problem, and in Russia, Tsar Paul was murdered. Russia withdrew from the league, right? And this war with England was costing France a lot of money. Please understand, it was costing France a lot of money. So therefore, Napoleon proposed peace with England, and England also did not want to continue fighting. As a result, we have the Peace of Amiens, which was signed. Peace of Amiens, which was signed between England and France, right? And it involved mutual restitution of properties. What is mutual restitution of properties? Mutual restitution of properties. That is, if England has conquered any territory of France, it has to be returned to France and vice versa. So whatever territories have been conquered by each other have to be returned to their original owners. That's called mutual restitution of properties. Now, please understand, Napoleon purposely signed the Treaty of Amiens to buy time. He understood that he cannot continue to fight against England because his navy was not strong enough. At the same time, it was costing a lot of money for France, and France did not have so much of money to fight to continue fighting England. So he purposely signed this Treaty of Amiens. He proposed peace, and England agreed. Now, after the Peace of Amiens, what did Napoleon do? He strengthened his army and navy. Right? He spent a lot of money and time in strengthening his army and navy. And once he felt that his armed forces were strong enough to tackle England, he began to follow a policy of aggrandizement, a policy of aggression, aggrandizement, expansion at the cost of his neighbors. Look here, he was supposed to only defeat England. He began to poke his nose into other European countries. He became like a rowdy of Europe. You see here, he occupied Piedmont in Italy. He occupies Piedmont. He interfered in Switzerland, Holland. He sent a mission to India to encourage the Indian princes to revolt against the British. He also sent a fleet to Egypt to restore French presence there. And then he went and conquered Hanover, which was a protectorate of England. So these are all the things he did. He occupied Piedmont in Italy, interfered in Switzerland, Holland. Then he sent a military mission to India to instigate Indian princes to rise against the British here. He sent a mission to Egypt and he conquered Hanover. Now, once he conquers Hanover, Hanover is a place in Germany, in the German speaking areas. And Hanover was a protectorate of England. She was being protected by England. And once Hanover was conquered by France, by Napoleon, England declared war against France. So this is the third time France and England are fighting. You remember, first time in Egypt, he had been defeated by England. Nelson defeated him. Armed neutrality, he lost. Right. Then third time, we have now he conquers Hanover, and you have a third war between England and France. And this is the Battle of Trafalgar, the famous Battle of Trafalgar, October 1805. This was a naval battle. You can see here, this was a naval battle fought between Napoleon and Admiral Nelson. Now, what happened? He thought that he had strengthened his navy to tackle the British navy, but it was not so. Her navy was still stronger than France, and you have a huge amount of casualties on either side, right? And you have Admiral Nelson destroying the major part of the French fleet. He was able to destroy Napoleon's fleet. Now, early morning, has the mist cleared? You see, this is the Battle of Trafalgar. In the early morning, the mist cleared. And then, when the mist cleared suddenly, Napoleon noticed Admiral Nelson on his deck, on his ship's deck, and he got a clear shot at him. So he took aim with his rifle and he shot Nelson dead. So Napoleon shot dead Nelson, but Nelson had done his work. He had destroyed the French fleet and he had prevented Napoleon from invading England. Napoleon's plan was to invade England, and he had destroyed the French navy and thus had saved England from a possible French attack, French invasion. So here Napoleon was defeated, but Nelson lost his life, right? So Napoleon's attempt to invade England failed. Now you see here on your screen. So three times he has failed to defeat England. Now earlier he had been appointed as first consul for 10 years. The Senate had appointed him as first consul for 10 years. Now he declared himself emperor. Right? You can see here Napoleon has Emperor of France, 1804 to 1814. So Napoleon became emperor in 1804. Why they signed treaty with England? Ankita, because I told you he wanted peace because um, he could not afford to continue fighting against England. So he asked for peace from England, and England also was ready to sign this peace agreement. The Peace of Amiens was signed, but this was a ploy on the part of Napoleon to buy time so that he can strengthen his armed forces, navy and army. And then he began to follow a policy of aggrandizement. And when he conquered Hanover, it resulted in the Battle of Trafalgar, and Napoleon was defeated. But Admiral in the process lost his life. Okay. Why he failed to annex England? Because his navy was destroyed by Nelson, Puja. So when his navy is destroyed, how can he invade England? Okay, we come back here. So here when he became the Emperor of France, please understand, again I come back here. I'll tell you at the end what to remember about Napoleon. Okay, so don't get lost in this maze of information, but we'll come back here. Are you able to catch me till here? Are you able to observe whatever I've been telling you till here? Can you raise your hands? Okay, clear. Okay, now let us come back. Now, thank you, thank you. Now look here. When Napoleon declared himself as the Emperor of France, another coalition was formed against him. European countries thought this fellow has become the Emperor of France. Again, he'll go to war against others. He was a warmonger. Napoleon was a warmonger, and they did not want to take chances with him. So a coalition is formed where you have four countries coming together: England, Austria, Russia, and Prussia, and they declared war against France. England, Austria, Russia, Prussia. And I told you, whenever there was a coalition where Austria is one of the members, he always attacked Austria, right? Brief of armed neutrality, Kartika, armed neutrality, I told you, England used to search for French goods on neutral country ships, right? So she would stop ships of other countries and start searching for French goods on mere suspicion. And this was a big headache for those countries. Taking the grievances of those countries, he formed a coalition against England. That's called armed neutrality. So he now attacked Austria. You see here, and he defeated Austria in the Battle of Ulm and Austerlitz. So this is the Battle of Austerlitz. You can see here the Battle of Austerlitz. This is the Battle of Austerlitz. He was able to defeat Austria. And this broke the back of the coalition. Please understand, Napoleon was at the peak of his powers at this point in time. He defeated Austria, and the other countries got scared. The other countries got scared of the strength of France. And in that context, we have Pitt the Younger, who became the Prime Minister of England. Pitt the Younger, he's supposed to have remarked, roll up the map of Europe. It will be not wanted the next 10 years. Roll up the map of Europe. It will not be wanted the next 10 years. In other words, roll the map and keep, because you cannot defeat Napoleon. He is so strong that you don't require a map now to find out how to attack him or make the war strategy. That's the meaning of that. So he defeated Austria in the Battle of Ulm and Austerlitz, and then he attacked Prussia. Now I seek your attention, please. I seek your attention. Now look here on your screen. So he attacks Prussia. In the Battle of Jena, Prussia was defeated. Prussia was the biggest German-speaking kingdom. Prussia, during those days, was the biggest among the German-speaking states. So he, in the Battle of Jena, defeated Prussia. Now, and please understand, you see, when he defeated Austria in the Battle of Ulm and Austerlitz, Austrian monarch, please understand, the Austrian emperor was nominally called the Holy Roman Emperor. Holy Roman Emperor. So his empire was called Holy Roman Empire, and he himself was called Holy Roman Emperor. Once Napoleon defeated Austria, he destroyed the Holy Roman Empire, calling it neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. So you see here, he defeated Prussia also. After defeating Austria and Prussia, the whole of the German states lay in the hands of Napoleon. He destroyed the Holy Roman Empire, calling it neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Then the Austrian emperor had to give up the title of Holy Roman Emperor. Now, please understand, those days, so you see here, this is the map of Prussia on the red outline. And this is what is called the Confederation of the Rhine, which was established by Napoleon. Those days, there were 300 German states. Understand this? There were 300 German states. After defeating Austria and Prussia, Napoleon reduced these 300 to 16, and he established what is called the Confederation of the Rhine. This is called the Confederation of the Rhine, consisting of 16 German states. You see here, Napoleon in 1806 created the Confederation of the Rhine, consisting of 16 states, and he became its protector. And he entrusted the affairs of running the affairs of this republic or confederation to the Germans themselves. He told the Germans, "You run the affairs of this Confederation of the Rhine yourself." And that kindled the spirit of nationalism and liberalism amongst the Germans, for which Napoleon is called the father of German unification movement. He is called the father of German unification movement, or the father of German nationalism and liberalism. Did you understand? You remember in the first Italian campaigns, Napoleon defeated the Austrians in the Italian peninsula. After defeating the Austrians in the Italian peninsula, he established two republics within Italy, that is Cisalpine and Ligurian republics, and entrusted the responsibility of running the affairs of these republics to the Italians themselves. And that kindled the spirit of nationalism and liberalism amongst the Italians, for which Napoleon is called the father of Italian nationalism and liberalism. Similarly, here he defeated Austria and Prussia and then established the Confederation of the Rhine after destroying the Holy Roman Empire. So he reduced 300 to 16. 300 German states were reduced to 16 states, and he established the Confederation of the Rhine that way, and entrusted the responsibility of running the affairs of this Confederation of the Rhine to the Germans themselves. And that kindled the spirit of nationalism and liberalism amongst the Germans. Did you understand? I want you to remember only these two things with respect to Napoleon. Hello? Did you understand that? All of you, can you raise your hands? I have repeated it twice. I hope it is able to, you're able to understand that part. Now we'll come back here. So he has defeated Austria. You see here, he has defeated Austria. He has defeated Austria. He has defeated Prussia. Then he defeated Russia. Russia, the biggest country in the world. And Napoleon, you have to give it to him. He defeated Russia in the Battle of Friedland. You see here, we have the Battle of Friedland. Tsar Alexander II was defeated in the Battle of Friedland, and the Treaty of Tilsit was signed. Napoleon was at the peak of his powers, and Napoleon and Tsar Alexander became friends. Napoleon, of course, defeated Alexander, but then later they became friends, thick friends. And look at the audacity of the Russian emperor when he made this statement: "Where is Europe? Where is it if it is not you and I?" He's telling Napoleon, this Tsar of Russia, where is Europe? Where is it if it is not you and I? He's telling France and Russia are Europe, equal to Europe. Where is Europe? Where is it if it is not you and I? Did you understand? Are you there with me? So he has defeated Austria, he has defeated Prussia, then he has defeated Russia. Out of the four coalition partners, he has defeated three: Austria, Prussia, Russia. And then again he focused on England. Fourth attempt. Fourth attempt. Right? So you should have the tenacity and determination of Napoleon. Look at him. Fourth attempt he's making to defeat England. And this is called continental system. Come back here. Okay, before that, what did Napoleon do? After defeating all these three countries, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, Napoleon was at the height of his powers in Europe, and he began to interfere in the affairs of other countries. He conquered the whole of Italy. Understand this. Earlier, he had only conquered Naples. Now he conquered the whole of Italy. He had established, he had defeated the Austrians in the Italian peninsula and established two republics earlier. Now he conquers the whole of Italy, and he declared himself as the king of Italy. Number one. Number two, he made his elder brother Joseph the king of Naples in Italy. So there was a small kingdom called Naples in Italy. So he makes his elder brother Joseph as the king of Naples. Then Napoleon established the kingdom of Holland, the kingdom of Netherlands or Holland, and made his younger brother Louis the king of Holland. So he is treating Europe as his grandfather's property. Did you get me that, all of you? Look at this fellow, drunk with power. As Lord Acton says, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. He did not know what to do. He was, thinking that Europe is his grandfather's property, that he could do anything he wanted. So he conquers the whole of Italy, and he declares himself as the king of Italy. He conquers Naples in Italy, makes his elder brother the king of Naples. Then he creates the kingdom of Holland and makes Louis, his younger brother, as the king of Holland. Then he destroyed the Holy Roman Empire and established the Confederation of the Rhine and became its protector. Right? Then he decided to tackle England, fourth attempt to tackle England. Now, what is this continental system? Understand this, please. This becomes relevant for even modern Indian history. for you to understand why Napoleon supported Tipu Sultan. It becomes relevant. So you should know these things, a little bit of these things. Now look here. Napoleon's understanding, what was Napoleon's understanding? It is difficult to defeat England. Why? Because England had a very powerful navy. At the same time, she had colonies all over the world. Industrial revolution was going on in England. You see, England was the place where industrial revolution began. We'll talk about industrial revolution topic in another day. So you have factories established in England. New machinery had been installed in those factories. She had undergone a technological revolution in England. Before that, an agricultural revolution had taken place. So England used to import raw materials from various parts of the world, including our colonies, like from, for example, from America, from India, etc. And then she will convert those raw materials into finished products and resell those finished products in our colonies and in other parts of the world. And she was making a lot of money, profits, right? And so Napoleon understood England is a very powerful country. She has a very powerful navy and also a powerful merchant marine. It will be difficult to defeat England. And therefore, he wanted to hurt the economy of England. He thought if I make England economically weak, then I can defeat her militarily also. And this policy of Napoleon is called continental system. Understand this, please. Well, under this continental system, you see here, this map will easily help you to understand this continental system. What did Napoleon do under this continental system? He told European countries, he told all of Europe, if you European countries trade with England, France is going to attack you. So he threatened all the European countries not to trade with England, right? And this policy of Napoleon is called continental system. And you see here, this is an imaginary red line. You see that line here, all of you? See, this is the red line. So United Kingdom is here, UK is here, England is there, right? So he's telling all the European powers, European countries, don't trade with England. Otherwise, France is going to attack you. Did you understand? So he was preventing Europe from trading with England so that England becomes economically weak. And once England is economically weak, then he can easily defeat England militarily. This was his plan. Now, England was not going to keep quiet with this continental system. What did England do? She in turn retaliated and she passed what is called orders in council. You see here, I have given it here. She passed what is called orders in council. What is this orders in council? England tells other European countries, if you don't trade with England, we will attack you. Did you understand? France is telling Europe, if you trade with England, France is going to attack them. And England is telling the same thing to those European countries. If you don't trade with England, England is going to attack you. Are you there with me? Now, please understand, this continental system, which was announced by Napoleon, was a big blunder. It was easy to announce, but difficult to enforce, difficult to apply and enforce. You know why? You see that red line. For France to prevent other European countries from trading with England, France should have a very, very powerful navy. France did not have a powerful navy like England had. She only had a powerful army, not a navy. And this continental system is considered to be a big blunder committed by Napoleon. On your screen, you see here. Why is it a big blunder? You see, all the essentials for the soldiers, French soldiers. Now, French soldiers want uniform. They want to wear uniform. They require leather goods, leather boots, leather belt, etc., leather gloves. No, it's cold in Europe, isn't it? So you require leather gloves, leather boots, etc. Coffee, sugar, tea, tobacco. All these was supplied by England to France. Once the continental system was announced by Napoleon, where he said that nobody should trade with England, French themselves began to smuggle those goods from England. France herself began to smuggle coffee, tea, sugar, clothes, and leather from England. And Napoleon could not know that. He could not understand that. This is number one. Number two is Europe as a continent was dependent on England for the supply of coffee, tea, tobacco, etc., sugar, etc. So it was England who used to supply all these things. Everybody in Europe was used to drinking the beverages in the morning, afternoon, coffee, tea, etc. Put sugar, mix it, and drink it. Now, when he announced the continental system, the prices of these goods increased in Europe, and there was a shortage. And people of Europe became very, very angry with Napoleon because he had announced the continental system. Because, for example, let's take a hypothetical example. Let us say in the morning you get up and you want to have a hot cup of coffee or tea, chai or coffee, and Napoleon has announced that. Whom will you be angry with? Early morning, you'll use the choices abuses against Napoleon. So the whole of Europe was angry with Napoleon because the prices of these essentials had gone up. Did you understand the humor here? Did you understand the humorous part of this? This is number two. Third is, you see, France used to sell luxury goods like silk and such things, right? France also experienced industrial revolution. But then, because of the French Revolution, the industrial revolution in France got stalled. Along with England, simultaneously, France is a neighboring country. Industrial revolution also began in France simultaneously, but it got stalled because of the French Revolution. But France was not manufacturing mass consumer goods. Like England was manufacturing mass consumer goods like soap, toothpaste, etc. Whereas France was manufacturing luxury goods like silk and other things. Once the continental system was announced by Napoleon, England stopped importing the luxury goods of France. It was a loss for France. She used to import silk from France, England. Now, instead of silk, she began to, manufacture wool and linen. And this was a loss for France because there was nobody to buy French silk. And did you understand? And lastly, the only way Napoleon could have harmed England was by starving England, because you see, all the wheat which was produced in France used to be exported to England. Now, by stopping the export of wheat, he could have starved England. But then there was no other people, nobody else to buy the French wheat, right? Only England was the market for French wheat. And what will happen if he doesn't sell the wheat? The wheat will get decomposed. People of France, the farmers will be very angry with Napoleon. So he therefore allowed the wheat of France to be sold to England. Did you understand? This is considered to be a big blunder. The continental system was a big blunder committed by Napoleon. Did you understand here? First point you did not understand. You see here, French, I have given it here. You go through it here. France began to smuggle English goods, right, into France. Like, for example, clothes, leather, tea, coffee, sugar, they were all brought from England into France. And when the continental system was announced, the French themselves began to smuggle these goods into France from England. Did you understand? So this is the continental system. Now look here. To enforce the continental system, Napoleon did something which might surprise all of you. Now look here on your screen. We have the Iberian countries of Portugal and Spain. This is Portugal here. You see, Portugal is here and Spain is here. And where is France? France is here. Right. Now, Portugal had very good relations with England. She had very good relations with England. Okay, now what happened? Napoleon, in order to enforce the continental system, told Portugal, you don't trade with England. If you trade with England, we will attack you. France is going to attack Portugal. Portugal said, get lost. We have good relations with England. We are going to trade with England and have diplomatic contacts with her. Who are you to stop us? When Portugal defied France, France declared war on Portugal. Right? France declared war on Portugal. And you know what Napoleon did? Napoleon marched French troops via Spain into Portugal. Did you understand? He did not seek the permission of the Spanish king. Now imagine China declares war on. Let us take a hypothetical example. China declares war on Sri Lanka, let's say, and she decides to march her troops via India because it's a shortcut. Now, how will you like it? There'll be a revolt here, and the government will fall down, isn't it? Now, the same thing happened here. France declared war on Portugal, and he has marched French troops through Portugal, through Spain into Portugal. That resulted in England, Portugal, and Spain declaring war against France. England came to the assistance of Portugal and Spain. This is the beginning of the Peninsular War. Did you understand? This is called the Peninsular Wars. You see this? So Portugal, Spain, England versus France. In the first phase, what happened is these three countries, Spain, Portugal, and England, defeated France. France was defeated. Now, when France was defeated, the other fellows joined Spain, Portugal, and England. That is Austria, Russia, Prussia. 6 countries joined together against France. Initially, Spain, Portugal, England defeated France. When France was defeated, Austria, Russia, Prussia joined against France. 6 countries again against Napoleon. And you see, Napoleon again showed his genius. You see here, whenever there was a coalition and Austria was one of the members, he will always and always attack Austria. Jaswant, why was he obsessed to conquer England? No, you remember this. When Louis was killed, 6 countries declared war against France. And England was one of the 6 countries. And France had defeated 5. Only one had to be tackled, that is England. And he was trying, repeatedly to defeat England. Okay, now look here. So whenever there was a coalition and Austria was a member, he attacked Austria. And again, he defeated Austria. You see here, in the Battle of Wagram, Austria was defeated. He defeated Austria in the Battle of Wagram. And who are the 6 countries here? You see here, Spain, Portugal, England, Austria, Russia, Prussia. So he has defeated Austria. Then Napoleon did something which was a blunder again. He attacked Russia. You see this? He attacked Russia with an army of 6 lakh. This is called the Moscow campaign. On your screen, 1812. This is called the Moscow campaign, 1812. With an army of 6 lakh. Now look here. With an army of 6 lakhs, Napoleon attacked Russia. He enters Russian territory. And please understand, the French soldiers are marching left, right, towards Moscow, led by Napoleon Bonaparte, their great general. And there was a time-tested strategy used by the Russians. This was a time-tested strategy which they used to use, the Russians. They did not offer battle to the French at the borders of Russia. When a war takes place, it will take place on the borders, isn't it? Now, you know what the Russians did? They simply withdrew themselves deep into the country. They withdrew themselves deep into the country. And the French began to march deeper and deeper and deeper into Russian territory. Now, please understand, the USSR was the biggest country in the world. In 1991, it disintegrated. Even after its disintegration, Russia is even now the biggest country in the world. So the French, when they were marching into Russia, even after marching 3 months into Russian territory, still Moscow was thousands of kilometers away. What were the Russians doing? I told you this was a time-tested strategy. The Russians were waiting for the winter to set in. And then you have snowfall. And the French army was caught deep in Russian territory. They are wearing simple clothes like this, pant and shirt, the French soldiers. And you have the biting Russian cold. It began to snow. And you have loss of loss of body heat. There was shortage of food in the French camp, and plague struck. Plague caused by rats, right? The food chain got contaminated by rat feces and urine, etc. Out of the 6 lakh soldiers, French soldiers who had entered Russian territory, of course, Napoleon ordered a retreat. It was too late now. He had marched deep into Russian territory. Now he had no choice because the biting Russian cold was killing his army. So he ordered for a retreat. And only 40,000 soldiers, French soldiers, were able to make it back. The rest died. The rest of the French army died because of the biting Russian cold and also the plague. Right? Was a disaster. So Russia was able to win against Napoleon without a battle. It was the nature which was the decisive factor here, which brought victory to Russia without a battle against France. So when the European countries came to know that the French army has drastically reduced in size, you have again 4 countries declaring war. Obviously, 6 countries had joined together. You have Austria, Russia, Prussia, and of course, you have England joining together. So England, Austria, Russia, Prussia declared war against France. And please understand, after coming back from France, though he had lost 70-80% of his army, you have to give it to Napoleon, he quickly reorganized another army. He organized another army and he fell upon these adversaries. Austrians were defeated. You see here, he defeated the Austrians at Dresden, the Russians at Bautzen, and the Prussians at Lutzen. He defeated all of them with a new army. He comes back from his Russian campaign, reorganizes another army, and then he defeated all these adversaries. But then ultimately, he was defeated in the Battle of Leipzig when Austria, Russia, Prussia, and Sweden joined together. In the Battle of Leipzig, Napoleon was defeated, and he was sent away to the island of Saint Elba in the Mediterranean. So he was sent away to the island of Saint Elba in the Mediterranean, and one of the brothers of Louis the 16th, Louis the 18th, was declared as the Emperor of France. So Louis the 18th became the emperor, the brother of Louis the 16th. Now, where was Napoleon? Napoleon was in the island of Saint Elba in the Mediterranean Sea. He was there for about 2 years, and the European countries had, broken their alliance. They had come together to fight against Napoleon, and they thought they have disposed him off. He has been defeated, and therefore there is no more necessity of a coalition. But then somehow, after 2 years, he escaped from Saint Elba. Napoleon escaped from Saint Elba and landed at Cannes in France. You see, this is Leipzig, the Battle of Leipzig in Germany. Leipzig is a place in Germany. So you have escape of Napoleon. He escaped from Saint Elba and landed at Cannes in France. When people of France saw Napoleon, they were rejoicing. They were very happy that he is back. And Louis the 18th ran away from France. Louis the 18th, the Bourbon king, ran away from France, right? And he approximately ruled for 100 days. This is called the Reign of 100 Days. When the European countries came to know that Napoleon was back on the throne of France, they knew that again he will disturb the map of Europe. He will again start fighting against European countries. So you have England and Prussia coming together. England and Prussia joined together and declared war against France. And again, you have to give it to Napoleon. He was able to defeat Prussia. He defeated the Prussians at Linji. But then you have the Iron Duke of Wellington, Arthur Wellesley, the same man who had defeated Tipu in the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War. So he's called the Duke of Wellington, the Iron Duke of Wellington, Arthur Wellesley. He stood his ground and he fought bravely against Napoleon Bonaparte. And Napoleon's army was caught between the English army and the Prussian army. And he could not fight on both the fronts. And he was defeated finally in the Battle of Waterloo. Waterloo is a place in Belgium. You see, Waterloo is a place in Belgium. So Napoleon was defeated in the Battle of Waterloo by Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington, and the Prussian army. And Napoleon was sent away to the island of St. Helena in the midst of the Atlantic Ocean. You see, this is St. Helena. This is Atlantic Ocean. They did not want to take chance. So deep in the Atlantic Ocean, there's one island called St. Helena. They sent him there. And he died there in the year 1821. This was the end of Napoleon Bonaparte, the final resting place of Napoleon Bonaparte. Are you there with me? Clear? This is Napoleon Bonaparte for you. Now let us analyze his particular life. I have another 5 minutes. Just hold on, 7 minutes. So how do we make an estimate of Napoleon? Of course, you see, he showed his administrative genius when he brought about a number of reforms as first consul. So he established the consular government, and as first consul, he brought about a number of reforms. That shows his administrative genius. Then he introduced order and confidence in the country of France. He brought about order and confidence. The establishment of the Bank of France restored financial confidence, right? At the same time, he repealed the decrees against the emigres. So whatever law had been passed against the emigres, that was repealed by him. He cancelled it. And his agreement with the Pope hailed him as the deliverer. So they were very happy that he had got into that agreement with the Pope called the Concordat. So people were very happy with that. At the same time, he threw career open to talent and introduced equality in society, in social areas, judicial fields, financial fields, etc. But then Napoleon is also considered to be the destroyer of the revolution. Now, the French Revolution had stood for certain principles: liberty, equality, fraternity, democracy, republicanism, rule of law, natural rights of man, all those things. He reversed the principles of the French Revolution. Now, he never allowed liberty of speech nor press. Right? He did not allow liberty of speech nor press. He established a highly centralized system of government, okay, and trimmed political liberty. Next, universal suffrage was introduced only theoretically. No, not everybody was given voting rights. It was introduced only theoretically. And of course, inferior social status was given to women. right? And then, as an emperor, he openly flaunted the principle of nationalism. So he conquered Spain, he conquered Portugal, he conquered Italy, he conquered Holland, right? So he gave scant respect to the principle of nationalism. And his introduction of the continental system shows his scant respect for people's aspirations. Who is he to tell Europe not to trade with England? So he introduced the continental system and he wanted to implement it strictly. In all these respects, Napoleon can be considered as the destroyer of the French Revolution, whatever the French Revolution had stood for. But then, how do we conclude? We conclude by saying that Napoleon is considered to be the father of Italian and German unification movements. He was the one who lit the lamp of nationalism and liberalism amongst the Italians and the Germans. And I want you to remember that part only in this topic called Napoleon Bonaparte. His wars are not important, right? His reforms, you try to understand that, it will help you in your essay paper when you write a compulsory essay, how he used religion for political purposes. So such things become important. Somewhere that this knowledge will come of use, somewhere in this examination. So don't undermine any part of this topic, though it is factual in nature. But I want you to remember how he is considered to be the father of German and Italian unification movements. That's what is. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte, right? This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte. Yeah, yes, you are true. He was a genius on the battlefield. It was not easy to defeat so many countries, and that too, when he had been defeated many times, he came back and he defeated all those countries except England. Except England, he was able to defeat everybody, including Russia, the biggest country in the world. So you have to give it to Napoleon Bonaparte. No, the thing is, there was no Germany, Dheeraj, and the next topic I'll be discussing is unification of Germany. There was no Germany during those days. The biggest German speaking state was Prussia. We'll come to that in some time. Tomorrow, next class on Monday, I'll talk about it. Unification of Germany, unification of Italy. We will discuss that. Unification of Germany is important from World War One point of view. So it's a thread. German unification, World War One, World War Two is a thread. Satyapal, I've already told you, England was one of the 6 countries which had declared war against France. It was England who declared war against France. So he obviously had to fight England, but he was obsessed with defeating England. You know, uh, you know, because it was a very powerful country. Which was that E part? No, modern. No, I have already answered this, Ramandeep. Now, Sakshi, after BA, which course helps for preparation? You go by your heart, Sakshi. You go by your heart. Okay. There are various subjects, isn't it? GS is common for everybody. You have one optional. You don't need to be a master in that. If it is interesting and you can manage that optional with or without coaching, then you go for that optional. The wide reading helps you. The wide reading will help you, right? So there are across various streams, people clear the examination. So you cannot say only this stream is useful for this exam. So all across various streams, people clear, right? Of course, nowadays more engineers are clearing, easy for them to answer CSAT, etc. Generally, they are also good in English and such things. So therefore, uh, that's a challenge. And they're bored with software jobs, engineers. So they want some variety. So they start preparing for UPSC. Okay. Are you there with me? So can we call it a day? So you please revise whatever we have discussed. We will discuss unification of Germany and Italy on Monday and go to other topics. So you have a great weekend. Yeah, MBA is also good, Sakshi. It all depends upon you, right? You need to something to fall back on, right? You should have something to fall back on ultimately. So do that course. Keep all the pros and the cons open. Look at the prospects and long-term prospects you look at, so that you can always shift back if things don't work out according to your plan. So that should be taken into consideration. Yeah, thank you, Kirti. So this is like a story. Remember that it is like a story. Go back and revise. If you have any doubts, please throw a mail and ask me on Monday. I'll try to clarify those doubts. So thank you very much. Have a good weekend. Have a safe weekend. We'll meet on Monday. Thank you very much. Good night. I'm logging out.